beneath the dust of forgotten deserts, in the silence of drowned coastlines, and among the shattered ruins of once mighty kingdoms, echoes linger from a past we do not fully understand. Stones aligned to the stars, temples carved with impossible precision, and myths of floods and vanished cities speak of civilizations whose stories remain half told. History, as we know it, is a fragile record, interrupted, erased, and often uncertain. From the legendary island of Atlantis, described by philosophers yet never found, to forgotten kingdoms buried beneath centuries of shifting sands, the world holds monuments and mysteries that resist explanation. Were these places the work of ordinary societies, or fragments of a deeper human story lost to time? Tonight, we walk slowly through these shadows of antiquity. We will trace vast ruins, study cryptic texts, and linger in the silence of chambers where ancient voices once spoke, not to solve these enigmas, but to reflect on the beauty of their persistence. This is the journey of unsolved ancient mysteries, a passage across civilizations remembered and forgotten. Settle in as we follow the whispers of history, from Atlantis to kingdoms time has left behind. Chapter 1. Atlantis in Plato's Dialogues. The story begins not in a ruin, nor beneath the waves, but within the written words of a philosopher. Around 360 BCE, in the twilight of classical Greece, Plato sat to compose two dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. In them, he sought to explore the nature of the cosmos, the ideal city, and the moral lessons hidden within human history. Yet it is here, almost incidentally, that we encounter the first account of Atlantis, a mighty island empire said to have risen in power, grown corrupt in spirit, and been swallowed by the sea in a single day and night of misfortune. Plato sets the stage through a tale inherited from his ancestor Solon, the great Athenian lawgiver. Solon, we are told, had traveled to Egypt, where priests in the city of Sais revealed to him stories far older than any remembered in Greece. They spoke of a war between a primeval Athens and a distant island civilization across the Pillars of Heracles, the straits we now call Gibraltar. Atlantis, they said, was larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined, its kings ruling over a vast domain of islands and lands. It was a place of wealth, of fertile plains, of palaces sheathed in orichalcum, an alloy gleaming like fire, and of fleets that commanded the seas. In Critias, Plato lingers on its geography. The island, ringed by alternating belts of land and water, was organized into concentric circles. At its center stood the capital, adorned with temples to Poseidon and Clito, the divine couple from whom the Atlantean kings descended. Vast canals and harbors fed its maritime power, while fertile plains yielded abundant harvests. It was, in Plato's telling, a picture of prosperity and of hubris. For the Atlanteans, once noble and virtuous, grew intoxicated with power, seeking dominion beyond their shores. Their armies swept across Europe and North Africa, threatening even Greece itself. Only the Athenians, in Plato's narrative, resisted and prevailed. And then, as if by divine judgment, Atlantis was lost, swallowed by the sea in a cataclysm. For centuries, these passages stood as allegory. To many of Plato's contemporaries, Atlantis was not history, but moral teaching. A cautionary tale about arrogance, excess, and the fragility of empires. Much like the myth of Icarus or the tragedy of Troy, its power lay in its symbolism. Yet, from the earliest days, others wondered, was Plato drawing on an echo of memory? Was Atlantis a parable, or was it the faint remembrance of a civilization that once truly existed? The debate has never ceased. Historians of antiquity, from Strabo to Plutarch, mentioned Plato's account, but offered little certainty. Later traditions expanded on the myth, transforming Atlantis into a subject of speculation, allegory, and imagination. By the Middle Ages, it drifted into the realm of legend. Yet in the Renaissance, as explorers set sail across the Atlantic and encountered the New World, the idea of Atlantis reawakened. Could Plato's vanished land have been an early glimpse of the Americas? Some thought so. Modern archaeology has not been silent in this discussion. In the volcanic island of Santorini, or ancient Thera, a powerful eruption around 1600 BCE devastated the Aegean. Its ash clouds, tsunamis, and firestorms erased much of the flourishing Minoan civilization. Excavations at Akrotiri reveal frescoes, multi-story buildings, and advanced engineering suddenly entombed beneath volcanic debris. To many, this destruction mirrored Plato's tale. A thriving maritime power humbled overnight by catastrophe. Was Atlantis not an oceanic kingdom, but a memory of Thera? Others pushed the boundaries further. Some locate Atlantis in Spain's Guadalquivir marshes, near the ancient city of Tartessos, known to classical writers for its wealth and mystery. There, satellite imagery has revealed circular patterns, faint but suggestive of Plato's rings of land and sea. Still others imagine Atlantis beneath the Caribbean, in the waters near Cuba, or even on the continental shelf of the Atlantic, drowned by rising seas at the end of the Ice Age. Each theory has its advocates, yet none have silenced the debate. Geology deepens the question. Around 12,000 years ago, as the last Ice Age waned, sea levels rose more than 100 meters, drowning vast coastal plains. Memories of lost lands, of floods, and of vanishing shorelines echo in myths worldwide, from the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh to the Hebrew story of Noah, from India's Manu to the flood legends of the Americas. Did Plato's Atlantis belong to this greater tapestry of memory? Could his Egyptian sources have preserved tales of peoples displaced by rising seas, woven into his philosophy as moral drama? The difficulty is that Plato's account is both vivid and incomplete. The dialogue Critias breaks off mid-sentence, never finishing its tale. Was this by design, or was the manuscript lost? The absence leaves us suspended, with Atlantis forever half described, a city of detail yet shrouded in silence. Later writers, hungry to complete the story, filled the void with invention, shaping Atlantis into whatever their age required. A noble utopia, a cautionary ruin, a symbol of divine punishment, or a hope for lost wisdom. Yet the power of Atlantis lies not in certainty, but in ambiguity. For Atlantis is not merely a place, it is a mirror. In its shining palaces and sudden downfall, civilizations see themselves. Each age finds in Atlantis its own reflection. The Renaissance saw in it a dream of exploration, the Enlightenment a vision of lost science, the modern world a mystery that resists resolution. Perhaps that is why it endures. Archaeologists remind us that Plato, above all, was a philosopher. His Atlantis may have been no more historical than his allegory of the cave, a parable designed to instruct, not to record. Yet even the possibility of memory lingers. The Egyptians who told Solon their tale claimed it was written in their records. Could fragments of forgotten prehistory have been preserved there? Could Plato have taken strands of truth and woven them into a story greater than its parts? The sea conceals and reveals in equal measure. Beneath its depths, drowned landscapes stretch unseen. On shifting shores, ancient ruins lie buried, awaiting rediscovery. Each discovery, whether a submerged city, a volcanic ruin, or a half-deciphered tablet, brings us closer, and yet never close enough. Atlantis hovers always at the horizon, not wholly myth, not wholly history, but an in-between place that beckons imagination. And so the story remains. An island empire described in words, its stones unseen, its legacy uncertain. Was Atlantis a warning, a memory, or both? Was it the echo of a flood, the ghost of a kingdom, or the invention of a philosopher? The answers recede as we approach, like the tide pulling away from shore. The sea is patient, and history is long. Atlantis waits, whether in stone, in memory, or only in the human longing for a world just beyond reach. And as we leave Plato's dialogues behind, we step into the broader landscape of unsolved mysteries, ruins and relics, carved in silence, waiting to be heard. Chapter 2, Göbekli Tepe in Turkey on. A barren hilltop in southeastern Turkey, the stones rise in silence. They are older than the pyramids, older than Stonehenge, older than every city that has ever been built. Here, at Göbekli Tepe, the landscape of history fractures, revealing a chapter that should not exist. Discovered in the 1990s by German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, this place has been called the world's first temple. But the word temple feels too narrow, too modern, for what lies here. The site dates back to 9600 BCE, at the very edge of the last ice age, long before the domestication of crops, before permanent villages or cities. And yet, upon this windswept ridge, hunter-gatherers raised stones weighing up to 16 tons, setting them in great circles, carving them with lions, vultures, serpents, and abstract symbols that still defy translation. The pillars stand in T-shaped rows, smooth yet imposing, each pair seemingly watching the other across a central chamber. At their center, two larger stones often rise higher, like silent guardians. Some bear reliefs of foxes slipping across their surfaces, wild boars frozen in mid-stride, scorpions, cranes, and leaping gazelles. Others carry strange geometric patterns, not quite language, but not mere decoration either. It is a menagerie of symbols, a frozen cosmology, carved in limestone and preserved by deliberate burial. For centuries, the mound of Göbekli Tepe had been nothing but an unremarkable hill, grazed by shepherds and overlooked by scholars. It was dismissed as natural. Only careful excavation revealed the truth, that this was no accident of geology, but a crafted sanctuary, intentionally entombed by the very people who built it. Why? Why would hunter-gatherers with no cities, no farms, and no metal tools invest such effort into shaping the sacred? Traditional archaeology had long assumed that religion and monumental architecture came after agriculture, that only once humans settled, stored grain, and built surplus could they afford the luxury of temples. But Göbekli Tepe reverses that equation. Here, belief seems to come first. The sanctuary was not the byproduct of civilization. Civilization may have been the byproduct of sanctuaries like this. The stones whisper of gatherings, bands of hunter-gatherers converging season after season, drawn to ritual feasts and ceremonies beneath the stars. Animal bones found in abundance suggest banquets on a scale far larger than daily subsistence. The rituals may have demanded cooperation, binding scattered tribes into networks of shared identity. It is possible, some scholars argue, that the labor of building Göbekli Tepe itself planted the seeds of agriculture, that the demand for food to feed the workers, the need to sustain ritual gatherings, drove the first experiments in cultivation and animal domestication. The carvings suggest a symbolic language of death and rebirth, predator and prey, the endless cycle of life renewed. Vultures loom large in the imagery. In many ancient cultures, vultures were seen as psychopomps, carriers of the soul from flesh into the sky. Some archaeologists have suggested that Göbekli Tepe may have been a center of funerary rites, where the dead were exposed to birds of prey, their spirits released into eternity. If so, the site was not only a temple, but a cosmic gateway, where the living and the dead communed under the open heavens. And yet, after centuries of use, the site was deliberately buried around 8000 BCE. Stone by stone, earth was piled against the pillars until the circles disappeared beneath the hill. Was this an act of reverence, sealing the sacred from profanation? Or was it fear, an attempt to bury something dangerous, some memory too heavy to bear? No one knows. What is clear is that Göbekli Tepe challenges the story of human origins. It is a reminder that history is not linear, that the march of progress may not always follow the neat sequence we were taught. First farming, then cities, then temples. Here, in the cradle of Anatolia, belief itself was the engine. Human beings came together not simply to survive, but to worship, to dream, to give shape to a cosmos they could not explain. Scholars remain divided. Some insist it was merely a sanctuary, a regional cult center for scattered tribes. Others see in it the faint outline of a forgotten civilization, one whose traces lie buried beneath millennia of soil. What is undeniable is that its builders were capable of organization, engineering, and symbolic thought on a scale that should not have existed at that time. The mythic undertone is impossible to ignore, a site so ancient that it dissolves the line between history and legend. Some have even linked it to flood myths and primordial cities remembered dimly in ancient epics. If civilization truly begins with Göbekli Tepe, then our earliest ancestors were not only survivors of the Ice Age, but visionaries, carving the unseen into stone. And still the question lingers, why did they bury it? Was it ritual closure, the end of a sacred cycle? Was it the coming of new beliefs, a cultural shift that demanded the old sanctuaries be entombed? Or was it fear? Fear of a power too great, a knowledge too dangerous to be left exposed beneath the open sky. The stones remain, silent in their earthen cradle, older than myth, older than memory. They are the first temples, or the last of something even more mysterious. And as the sun sets across the Anatolian plateau, the question of Göbekli Tepe remains open, an unanswered riddle at the dawn of human time. Chapter 3. The Pyramids of Giza rising from the desert sands of Egypt. The Pyramids of Giza command both awe and silence. The Great Pyramid, towering at nearly 480 feet in its original form, has stood for over 4 millennia. No other monument has so perfectly fused stone, mathematics, and mystery. It is the last of the 7 wonders of the ancient world still standing, an eternal sentinel at the edge of the Nile. Constructed around 2500 BCE, under the reign of Pharaoh Khufu, the Great Pyramid is composed of more than 2 million limestone blocks, each weighing from 2 to 15 tons. For centuries, historians have marveled at its precision. Its sides are aligned almost perfectly to the 4 cardinal directions, deviating by mere fractions of a degree. Its base, covering 13 acres, is leveled to within less than an inch. The engineering mastery required to achieve this without iron tools, pulleys, or the wheel continues to perplex modern engineers. Mainstream Egyptology explains the pyramid as a tomb, a monumental resting place for Khufu. Yet within its vast chambers, no body has ever been found. Unlike later royal tombs, the Great Pyramid is curiously bare of inscriptions, murals, or treasures. It stands in silence, without the decorative affirmations of afterlife belief that adorn other burial sites. If it was only a tomb, why does it feel so much more? The interior architecture deepens the puzzle. 3 main chambers lie hidden within. The subterranean chamber cut into the bedrock, the so-called Queen's Chamber, and the King's Chamber, whose ceiling is formed from massive granite beams weighing up to 70 tons each. Above them, a series of relieving chambers distributes the immense weight of the pyramid. But their design has led some to suspect a deeper function, perhaps acoustic, perhaps symbolic, perhaps something lost to time. Passages cut with astonishing precision run deep into the structure, some angled toward the northern and southern skies. Scholars have noted their alignments with key stars, Orion's belt, associated in Egyptian mythology with Osiris, god of resurrection, and Sirius, linked to the goddess Isis. The pyramid itself may have been a cosmic instrument, joining heaven and earth through stone and starlight. Modern science has only sharpened the enigma. In recent years, muon tomography, using subatomic particles that pass through matter, has revealed vast hidden voids within the pyramid. These empty spaces, unexplored and inaccessible, hint that secrets remain sealed within the heart of the stone. Are they structural relieving pressure, or are they chambers yet to be discovered, echoing with a purpose unknown? The Great Pyramid is not alone. Khufu's pyramid is flanked by those of his son Khafre and the smaller pyramid of Menkaure. Together, they form a triad that some suggest mirrors the stars of Orion's belt. If intentional, it speaks of an architecture not merely of stone, but of the cosmos, a celestial blueprint written on the desert floor. The debate between scholars and alternative thinkers remains fierce. Egyptologists emphasize the funerary function, pointing to texts and traditions that associate pyramids with the pharaoh's journey into the afterlife. But others see in the design something more ambitious: astronomical observatories, energy devices, or symbolic gateways between worlds. Though such theories often lie outside academic consensus, they arise from the pyramid's very refusal to explain itself. Its silence demands speculation. Even ancient visitors felt its pull. Herodotus, writing in the 5th century BCE, spoke of hidden passages and subterranean chambers filled with wonders. Medieval Arab historians told of traps, treasures, and secret inscriptions. Legends grew around the pyramid as though it were not merely a monument, but a riddle left for the future. One cannot ignore the human effort behind it. Tens of thousands of laborers, once thought to be slaves, but now understood as skilled workers organized in rotating crews, cut, transported, and placed the massive stones. Nearby workers' villages reveal a society capable of supporting such an immense project, with bakeries, breweries, and medical facilities. The building of the pyramids was not only the achievement of a pharaoh, but of a civilization united under belief and purpose. Yet purpose is the deepest mystery. If it was a tomb, why no body? If it was symbolic, why so precise? If it was simply to display power, why invest such astronomical resources in geometry aligned to the stars? The answers slip through our grasp like desert sand. The pyramid has endured earthquakes, looting, and the erosion of time. Its white limestone casing stones, once polished to reflect the sun like a beacon, have long been stripped away. Yet even in its weathered state, it dwarfs every structure around it. It seems less a relic of the past than a monument for eternity. Something meant not only to last, but to speak across ages. Standing before it today, one feels the weight of unanswered questions pressing from its stones. Who truly designed it? What knowledge guided their hands? Why does it still conceal hidden voids after 4,500 years? The Great Pyramid does not yield its secrets. It remains as it has always been, vast, silent, and immovable. A riddle in stone. Perhaps it is not meant to be solved, but simply to remind us that the ancient world was stranger, deeper, and more mysterious than we can yet imagine. And as the sun sets behind the desert horizon, the shadows of the pyramids stretch across the sand, as though the earth itself were pointing toward mysteries still hidden, waiting in silence for the right eyes to see. And as the sun sets behind the desert horizon, the shadows of the pyramids stretch across the sand, as though the earth itself were pointing toward mysteries still hidden, waiting in silence for the right eyes to see. Yet, the pyramid complex of Giza is not complete without its most enigmatic guardian. To the east of Khafra's pyramid, hewn directly from the limestone bedrock, rests a figure both timeless and troubling. The Great Sphinx. Half lion, half human, it gazes eternally toward the rising sun. Its presence feels less like a companion to the pyramids than a sentinel, as though it watches not only over the plateau, but over secrets that the pyramids themselves dare not reveal. The Sphinx is older than certainty allows. Mainstream Egyptology attributes it to Pharaoh Khafra, around 2500 BCE, suggesting it was carved as part of his pyramid complex. Yet the evidence is ambiguous. No inscription directly ties the statue to Khafra, and the erosion patterns that ripple across its body have sparked decades of debate. Some geologists, such as Robert Schoch, argue that the weathering bears the signature not of wind and sand, but of heavy rainfall that would have last soaked the plateau thousands of years earlier, long before dynastic Egypt. If true, the Sphinx could be millennia older than the pyramids themselves, a relic from a forgotten age when Egypt's climate was lush and rivers coursed where now only sand lies. The face itself deepens the riddle. Though widely believed to represent Khafra, some argue its features do not match his known likenesses. Erosion and deliberate alteration complicate the question. Yet whispers persist that the Sphinx's visage may once have borne a different face entirely, perhaps even of a long-remembered, long-erased king whose name is lost to time. Its body, stretched more than 240 feet, and its paws extending forward like an eternal prostration, invites speculation about its original purpose. Was it a symbol of royal power, linking the pharaoh with the might of the lion? Or was it a guardian of sacred knowledge, keeping watch over the horizon of eternity? Legends recorded by Arab chroniclers speak of hidden chambers beneath its paws, containing histories of the world before the flood. Though archaeological surveys have revealed anomalies under the bedrock, these remain unexcavated, their contents, if any, still sealed. Like the pyramids, the Sphinx embodies the paradox of Egypt, a civilization both documented and unknowable. Hieroglyphs tell us much, yet when it comes to the plateau itself, silence speaks louder than words. The pyramids and the Sphinx form a dialogue of stone, one pointing upward to the stars, the other gazing outward across the desert. Together, they feel less like monuments of a single reign and more like a script written across the land, a message to posterity, waiting for those who can decipher it. And so, as night falls upon Giza and the constellations emerge above the desert sky, we find ourselves caught between certainty and wonder. The pyramids stand in mute perfection. The Sphinx waits with eternal patience. Both are guardians of questions that may never be answered. Chapter 4. The Sphinx of Giza at the edge of the Giza Plateau, where desert meets sky, there lies a figure carved into silence. Its body stretches more than 70 meters, its paws extending forward in eternal vigil. The Great Sphinx of Giza, half lion, half human, is not a building of stones stacked with precision, but a living monument cut directly from the limestone bedrock. It is as though the earth itself was sculpted into a riddle, one that has stared eastward for thousands of years, awaiting the rising sun. The Sphinx is inseparable from mystery. Egyptologists often attribute its creation to Pharaoh Khafra, builder of the second pyramid, around 2500 BCE. They point to the Sphinx's alignment with Khafra's pyramid complex, and to fragments of a statue in the nearby temple that may bear his likeness. Yet nowhere in the vast corpus of hieroglyphs is the Sphinx's origin directly stated. There are no inscriptions proclaiming Khafra as its builder, no texts affirming its role. The silence of history leaves space for doubt. Its face, though weathered and scarred, still retains a human presence. Many believe it once bore the likeness of Khafra himself, a fusion of man and lion symbolizing divine kingship. Others, however, see something older, a visage softened by erosion, not carved with the crisp lines of Old Kingdom art. In the 14th century, Arab chroniclers noted the Sphinx already missing its nose, perhaps destroyed by iconoclasts who saw it as a remnant of pagan idolatry. Yet legends also claim Napoleon's soldiers blasted it away with cannon fire, though sketches from earlier centuries show the Sphinx already disfigured. Its wound is itself a mystery, a scar that speaks of forgotten violence or deliberate erasure. But the most profound debates concern not the face, but the body. Along its flanks, erosion runs deep, rippling across the limestone in patterns some geologists argue could not have been carved by mere wind and sand. Robert Schoch, in the early 1990s, argued these marks are the legacy of heavy rainfall that last drenched the plateau thousands of years earlier, when the Sahara was fertile and green. If true, the Sphinx would predate Khafra by millennia, belonging to an epoch before dynastic Egypt, a remnant of a forgotten civilization whose traces are buried beneath shifting sands. This hypothesis, controversial yet persistent, has unsettled the tidy timeline of Egypt's past. For if the Sphinx is truly older than the pyramids, then Egypt's monumental architecture did not begin with the pharaohs, but with an earlier, unknown culture capable of shaping stone on a colossal scale. Who they were and why their presence has otherwise vanished remains unanswered. Beneath the pores of the Sphinx, further mysteries linger. Inscriptions from later dynasties speak of chambers hidden beneath its body, containing records of the gods, or perhaps the lost history of the world before the flood. In the 1990s, ground-penetrating radar surveys revealed anomalies, hollow spaces beneath the bedrock, suggestive of cavities or tunnels. But access has been restricted, and the contents of these voids remain concealed. Whether they are natural fissures, unfinished quarries, or sealed chambers filled with secrets, we cannot yet know. The Sphinx Temple, lying directly in front of the monument, only deepens the enigma. Constructed from massive limestone blocks cut from the very ditch that released the Sphinx's body, the temple is stark, geometric, and megalithic in style. Its colossal stone blocks weigh up to 200 tons each, rivaling the megaliths of Baalbek in Lebanon. Some scholars argue the temple predates Khafra, later repurposed by dynastic kings. If so, the Sphinx and its temple belong to an age of lost architecture, later absorbed into pharaonic religion. Celestial alignments also play their role. The Sphinx faces due east directly toward the rising sun at the equinoxes. Its gaze binds it to the solar cycle, linking Earth and sky in eternal rhythm. Some researchers point to correlations with the constellation Leo, suggesting that around 10,500 BCE, when the Nile Valley was lush and fertile, the rising sun aligned with the lion in the sky. If intentional, the Sphinx may not only embody a lion in stone, but also mirror the heavens, an earthly reflection of celestial order. Throughout history, the Sphinx has invited stories as much as it has invited study. The dream stele, placed between its paws by Thutmose Thor in the 15th century BCE, tells of a prince who slept in its shadow and dreamed that the great statue promised him kingship if he would clear it of encroaching sand. This tale of divine encounter demonstrates that even in the New Kingdom, 1,000 years after Khafra, the Sphinx already held sacred authority. Its power transcended dynasties, reaching into the spiritual imagination of Egypt. Yet despite centuries of reverence, the Sphinx has always resisted certainty. To scholars, it is both familiar and alien, a monument within reach of history, yet just outside its grasp. Its scars may whisper of ancient reigns. Its hollow spaces may conceal untold records. Its face may not belong to Khafra at all. Like the pyramids beside it, the Sphinx is a mirror in stone, reflecting not answers but questions. And so, as dawn returns to the plateau, the first rays of the sun strike the Sphinx's brow, illuminating its gaze once more. For thousands of years this cycle has repeated, and for thousands more it may continue. The Sphinx will watch as empires rise and fall, as sands shift and storms pass. But it will not speak. It remains a riddle carved into the earth, a riddle we may never solve. Chapter 5. Stonehenge in England. On the windswept Salisbury plain of southern England, the land seems to breathe with memory. A vast openness stretches across fields and sky. But at its center rises a circle of stones that has drawn the gaze of humankind for millennia. Stonehenge, with its silent monolith standing against the horizon, is both monument and enigma. To approach it is to feel time fold upon itself, for these stones were raised not in the age of kings or castles, but thousands of years before written history in Britain had even begun. The origins of Stonehenge reach back to a distant world. Archaeologists divide its construction into phases, beginning around 3000 BCE, when the first circular earthwork enclosure was dug with primitive tools of antler and bone. This earlier stage, though simple in appearance, already reveals a deliberate design. A great circular ditch and bank, with carefully spaced entrances aligned toward the rising sun on the summer solstice. The choice of alignment was not coincidence. It speaks to a culture whose rituals and survival were deeply tied to the rhythms of the sky. Over the centuries that followed, the monument grew into a far more complex structure. By around 2500 BCE, the iconic sarsen stones, towering blocks of sandstone, were raised into the circle and the horseshoe formation that still stand today. Each of these massive stones weighs up to 25 tons, yet they were transported from quarries nearly 20 miles away. Even more astonishing are the smaller blue stones, each weighing up to 4 tons, which were carried from the Preseli Hills of Wales, some 150 miles distant. How a prehistoric society achieved such feats without wheels, cranes, or metal tools remains one of Stonehenge's enduring mysteries. The engineering itself is remarkable. The builders shaped mortise and tenon joints into the stones, locking the lintels securely upon the uprights, an architectural technique thousands of years ahead of its time. The sarsens were not simply erected, but carefully dressed, their surfaces smoothed, their edges subtly tapered to create the illusion of uniformity. From afar, they appear eternal, as though they rose from the earth itself, but each placement reflects painstaking human effort, intention, and design. What was Stonehenge meant to be? To this question, archaeology offers many answers, yet none fully satisfy. Excavations have uncovered cremated human remains, suggesting it functioned as a burial ground, at least in part. The circular form, echoed across Neolithic Europe in timber and stone, suggests a ceremonial gathering place. And then there is the sky. The alignment of the main axis toward the midsummer sunrise and midwinter sunset reveals a deep concern with the solstices. Standing in the circle on those days, one sees the sun rise or fall exactly in line with the stones, a choreography of light and shadow designed to mark the passage of time. Such precision demands more than casual observation. It implies an advanced understanding of astronomy and the cycles of the heavens. Were these stones a kind of calendar, tracking the sun and moon to guide planting, harvesting, and ritual? Or did they serve a more symbolic role, aligning human life with cosmic order? Some scholars propose Stonehenge as a great temple of renewal, a place where the turning of the seasons was sanctified in ceremony and myth. Yet beyond these interpretations lies a deeper sense of mystery. For why would a community of farmers and herders, living in what we would call the Neolithic world, devote generations of labor to shaping and raising stones of such magnitude? What compelled them to drag the blue stones across mountains and rivers? A task requiring thousands of journeys and immense cooperation. The answer may lie not in utility, but in belief, in the power of sacred spaces to bridge earth and sky, life and death. Legends that surround Stonehenge, though born much later, echo these themes. Medieval tales claimed the wizard Merlin had conjured the stones from Ireland by magic. Folklore spoke of giants dancing in a circle, turned to stone by ancient gods. Such myths, though fanciful, reveal how successive cultures sensed an otherworldly presence here, as though Stonehenge were more than a monument, but a threshold into realms beyond ordinary time. Modern science, too, continues to probe its secrets. Ground-penetrating surveys and nearby excavations have revealed a vast ritual landscape around Stonehenge. Avenues, burial mounds, timber circles, and pits stretching for miles. It was not an isolated monument, but the centerpiece of a wider ceremonial complex, built and rebuilt over centuries. The picture that emerges is of a landscape alive with meaning, where communities gathered not merely for survival, but for ritual, remembrance, and cosmic communion. The weathering of the stones tells another story. Lichen clings to their surfaces, and cracks whisper of thousands of winters endured. Yet some researchers note that these stones may have been chosen not only for their durability, but for their sound. When struck, certain blue stones resonate with a bell-like tone. Could music, vibration, and ritual sound have once filled this circle, merging human voices with the echoes of the stones themselves? If so, Stonehenge was not only a monument to sight, but to hearing, a place where the senses converged in sacred experience. Still, many questions remain unanswered. Why was Stonehenge eventually abandoned? What rituals unfolded within its circle of shadows? Did those who built it see themselves as aligning with the stars, or as calling down their power upon the earth? No texts remain, no inscriptions survive. What lingers are only the stones themselves and the silence they hold. To walk among them today is to feel that silence press upon you. The stones rise as guardians of memory, yet they offer no explanation. On the solstice mornings, crowds still gather, just as they may have thousands of years ago, to watch the sun crown the horizon through the ancient gateway. In that moment, past and present seem to collapse into one, and the monument awakens once more, fulfilling its role as a bridge between worlds. Stonehenge endures as a riddle of stone and sky. It is both deeply human and profoundly cosmic, an echo of lives lived long before us, yet still pulsing with relevance in our own time. Perhaps its purpose was never meant to be fully understood, but to inspire wonder, to remind us of the vastness of the cosmos and the mystery of our place within it. As the winds sweep across Salisbury Plain, bending grass and carrying clouds, the stones remain, unyielding, eternal. Their shadows lengthen with the turning sun, marking the same cycles that guided their builders. And though the questions may never be fully answered, the mystery itself is a gift, an invitation to listen to what the earth remembers, and to step into the silence where time itself seems to pause. Chapter 6. The Nazca Lines in Peru. Beneath the relentless sun of southern Peru, the desert lies vast and unbroken, a plain of ochre and stone that stretches to the horizon. At first glance it appears barren, featureless, a landscape of silence and emptiness. But from above, the ground awakens into patterns of astonishing scale, immense figures of birds and beasts, geometric shapes, spirals, and lines so long they vanish into the distance. These are the Nazca Lines, geoglyphs etched into the earth between 500 BCE and 500 CE, preserved for centuries by the desert's unyielding dryness. To walk upon them is to see nothing, only shallow furrows carved into gravel. But from the air, their full form is revealed, as though meant for the gaze of gods or beings not bound to the ground. The sheer variety of the lines is staggering. Some stretch for miles in unbroken paths across the desert, while others coalesce into intricate images. A hummingbird with wings outstretched nearly 400 feet wide, a monkey curled with a spiral tail, a spider elongated across the sands. There are trapezoids broad as fields, triangles sharpened to precise angles, and spirals that seem to draw the eye inward towards some unseen center. Each design was made by removing the dark, sun-baked pebbles from the desert surface, exposing the lighter earth beneath. With no rain and little wind, the lines remain visible today, preserved by the very desolation that once seemed to erase life here. How were these vast figures created with such precision? Scholars believe the Nazca people used simple tools and wooden stakes, setting out grids to scale up small drawings into monumental designs. Experiments have shown that such methods are possible, requiring coordination, but no advanced technology. Yet the question remains, why? What purpose demanded such immense effort on a canvas only visible from above? Theories abound. Some archaeologists suggest the lines served as ceremonial pathways, walked during rituals that honored deities of fertility, water, and the sky. The desert's scarcity of water loomed over every life in Nazca society, and some believe the geoglyphs were offerings, vast prayers etched into the earth, beseeching the gods to bring rain. Others argue that the lines align with celestial bodies, functioning as a kind of observatory, a way to track solstices and star risings that guided planting and ritual. Then there are the interpretations that push further into mystery. Could these have been messages to the heavens, signs drawn large enough to be seen from the sky? The idea has long fueled speculation that the Nazca understood their world in ways we struggle to imagine. Some see the animals as totems or mythic beings, each embodying forces of nature essential to survival. Others wonder if the figures were meant to be seen by spirits themselves, the desert transformed into a sacred stage for the divine. In the 20th century, the lines came under serious study, particularly through the work of German archaeologist Maria Reicher. Devoting her life to the Nazca Desert, she measured, mapped, and preserved the geoglyphs, arguing for their astronomical significance. She believed the lines charted solstices, equinoxes, and star alignments, forming the blueprint of a vast open-air observatory. Her dedication earned her the title the Lady of the Lines, and thanks to her, the Nazca Desert was recognized as a World Heritage Site, its fragile wonders protected for future generations. Yet even with decades of study, answers remain elusive. Satellite imaging and drone surveys have uncovered hundreds of previously unseen geoglyphs, expanding the mystery further. Some are older than the Nazca civilization itself, suggesting a continuity of sacred tradition across cultures. Others seem purely geometric, as if designed to direct movement rather than depict form. Taken together, they reveal a culture that inscribed its beliefs not in temples of stone, but upon the living skin of the earth. Walking among the lines today, one feels their silence keenly. There are no inscriptions, no texts to explain their meaning. Only the figures, etched against the desert floor, waiting. The hummingbird spreads its wings eternally. The monkey curls its spiral tail. The spider stretches across the plain. Each one lingers as both image and enigma, preserved by time yet withholding its voice. And so, the Nazca Lines stand as an invitation to imagination, to reverence, to humility before the mysteries of the past. Were they maps to the stars, paths of pilgrimage, messages written to unseen watchers in the sky? Or were they prayers, vast and enduring, for water, life, and continuity in a harsh and uncertain world? Perhaps all of these, perhaps none. What we do know is that they endure. As planes drift overhead and satellites capture them from orbit, the lines continue to speak, though in whispers we have yet to understand. Their makers are long gone, their society vanished, yet the desert still holds their vision. Etched into the silence, the geoglyphs remind us that humanity has always looked beyond itself, toward the heavens, toward the gods, toward meaning written into the vastness of creation. As dusk falls over the desert, the wind stirs faintly, carrying dust across the lines. The figures darken in shadow, almost vanishing into the plain, until only the memory of their form lingers. And when night descends, the stars shine overhead, brilliant and cold, mirroring the patterns below. It is here, between earth and sky, that the Nazca once inscribed their vision. Mystery made visible across the endless desert floor. Chapter 7. The Olmec colossal heads in the humid lowlands of southern Mexico, where rivers coil through dense jungles and mist clings to the canopy, stand the enigmatic guardians of an ancient world. They are faces carved from stone, massive, solemn, and unmoving, gazing outward as if locked in eternal contemplation. These are the colossal heads of the Olmec civilization, sculpted from basalt between 1200 and 400 BCE. Some weigh more than 40 tons, their features chiseled with striking individuality. They are neither gods nor abstract forms, but human visages, marked by expressions of authority, dignity, and quiet strength. The Olmec civilization is often called the mother culture of Mesoamerica, for its influence rippled outward into later societies such as the Maya and the Aztec. Yet so little of their story remains. Unlike the great codices of the Maya or the sprawling stone cities of the Aztec, the Olmec left no surviving texts to speak their history. What endures are their monuments, and among these, the colossal heads are the most compelling. Silent witnesses that carry within their carved stone an untold narrative. Each head is unique, distinguished by facial features that suggest individuality: broad noses, full lips, deep-set eyes, and the distinct headdresses or helmets that crown their foreheads. Some scholars believe these to be portraits of rulers, immortalized in stone to preserve their power beyond death. Others propose they represent great warriors or ball players, symbols of authority within a complex and hierarchical society. The detail is so precise that many researchers see them as true likenesses, suggesting the Olmec intended to preserve the memory of specific individuals rather than generalized archetypes. But perhaps the greatest mystery lies not in their identity, but in their creation. The basalt used for these sculptures was quarried miles away from where the heads were discovered. In the case of San Lorenzo, the nearest known quarry lies in the Tuxtla Mountains, over 50 miles distant. With no wheels, no beasts of burden, and no iron tools, How did the Olmec transport blocks of stone weighing tens of tons across rivers and forests? The prevailing theory suggests they floated the massive boulders on rafts along waterways before dragging them overland using ropes, manpower, and ingenuity. Yet the sheer scale of the task suggests an organized, disciplined society, capable of mobilizing labor and resources on a monumental level. Archaeological excavations at sites like San Lorenzo and La Venta reveal that the heads were often buried or deliberately arranged, sometimes facing outward as if guarding ceremonial centers. At San Lorenzo, colossal heads lined avenues, looking outward toward the surrounding plains, as if watching both the land and the people. At La Venta, they were placed near complex platforms and mounds that suggest ritual activity. Their placement implies more than artistry. It implies sacred function. And still, the mystery deepens. Some of the heads bear traces of recarving, suggesting they may have once been thrones, massive stone seats, that were later reshaped into human visages. If so, this act of transformation hints at shifting meanings. Rulers immortalized by reworking the very symbols of their power. Thrones made into faces, power made eternal. The Olmec themselves remain shadowed. Their villages and ceremonial centers, San Lorenzo, La Venta, Tres Zapotes, speak of a society that flourished with advanced urban planning, long-distance trade, and artistic mastery. They cultivated maize, cacao, and squash, sustaining large populations. They created jade figurines, intricate carvings, and perhaps even laid the foundation for the sacred ball game later central to Mesoamerican life. Yet their writing system, if one existed, has not survived in full. A few glyphs carved on artifacts offer tantalizing hints, but not enough to unlock their voice. This silence has fueled speculation. The colossal heads, with their commanding features, have even been drawn into debates far beyond archaeology. Some fringe theories suggest they represent visitors from distant lands, pointing to facial features interpreted as non-local. Mainstream scholarship, however, maintains they are portraits of the Olmec themselves, who, like all ancient peoples, reflected the diversity of human appearance without requiring external origins. What is undeniable is the psychological weight of standing before one, in the sweltering heat of the jungle, surrounded by the calls of birds and the distant rustle of leaves. The colossal head looms like a sentinel. Its eyes, carved thousands of years ago, seem to meet one's gaze. Its silence feels deliberate, as though guarding secrets that the earth itself refuses to give up. Today, 17 colossal heads are known, scattered across Mexico in sites and museums, each one a fragment of a lost epic. Some were discovered toppled, others buried, others weathered by centuries of exposure. Together, they tell us that the Olmec valued memory, power, and permanence. They remind us that long before the great cities of Mesoamerica rose, there were already hands shaping stone into portraits, already minds conceiving of art on a monumental scale. And yet, beyond the stone, the questions remain. Who were the men whose faces are carved here? What stories did their lives carry? Were they rulers whose voices commanded nations, or ancestors revered in timeless ritual? Were they guardians, their faces meant to watch over the living and the dead? Or were they symbols of something deeper, an idea of authority, cast in stone to endure long after names and deeds were forgotten? The Olmec colossal heads endure as more than stone. They are echoes of a vanished society, fragments of a memory that refuses to disappear entirely. They remind us that even in silence, the past speaks. It speaks through weight, through presence, through the unyielding gaze of stone. And it leaves us with questions that, like the jungle mist, drift and vanish before we can grasp them. As twilight falls over the lowlands, the faces of the colossal heads catch the last light. Their eyes darken, their outlines blur into the encroaching jungle, and in the silence of the evening, they seem to withdraw once more into mystery, as though they had only briefly emerged from the past to remind us of its vast, untold depths. Chapter 8, Teotihuacan's Pyramid of the Sun in. The heart of central Mexico lies a city of ghosts. Its streets are silent, its temples long abandoned, yet its scale still overwhelms those who walk its avenues. This is Teotihuacan, the city where men became gods. Long before the Aztec Empire, long before written chronicles recorded Mesoamerican history, Teotihuacan rose from the Valley of Mexico like a vision of stone and order. At its height, between 100 BCE and 550 CE, it was among the largest cities on Earth, home to perhaps 100,000 souls. Its wide boulevards, monumental temples, and sprawling compounds spoke of a people who sought not only to build a city, but to mirror the cosmos itself in stone. At the center of this sacred geometry stands the Pyramid of the Sun, a mountain of masonry that dominates the city's ceremonial core, rising over 200 feet. Its base spreads nearly 700 feet across, making it one of the largest structures ever built in the ancient world. To climb its steps even today is to feel a weight of reverence, as though ascending not merely stone, but an axis connecting earth to sky. Its alignment is deliberate, its corners and faces angled towards celestial cycles, its position fixed along the Avenue of the Dead, where temples and plazas extend in symmetry like constellations laid upon the earth. The pyramid was built in phases, its stones hauled from nearby quarries, its outer layers once brightly painted, catching the sun with blazing color. Yet despite its monumental presence, much about its construction remains veiled. No texts survive to name the rulers who commanded its rise. No records describe the ceremonies held upon its summit. The very people who built Teotihuacan remain uncertain, their origins obscured in layers of time. Beneath the pyramid, however, archaeology has uncovered wonders. In the 1970s, explorations revealed a network of tunnels running beneath its massive weight. These subterranean chambers, carved directly into volcanic bedrock, held offerings that shimmer with meaning: jade figurines, seashells carried from distant coasts, obsidian blades sharp as truth itself, and most striking of all, pools of liquid mercury discovered in sealed chambers. Mercury, shimmering like quicksilver, is thought to have symbolized rivers of the underworld, reflecting a cosmic landscape mirrored beneath the city. These offerings suggest that the pyramid was more than a monument. It was a gateway, a place where the living touched the realm of gods and ancestors. The pyramid's alignment deepens its mystery. Its orientation does not conform perfectly to the cardinal directions, but instead shifts slightly, aligning with the setting sun on certain dates linked to agricultural cycles. This suggests a fusion of cosmic and earthly rhythms, where the rise of crops and the movement of stars became interwoven. Teotihuacan was not simply built for habitation. It was a map of the universe, lived and enacted by its people. And yet, the Pyramid of the Sun does not stand alone. To its north rises the Pyramid of the Moon, mirroring the sacred mountain Cerro Gordo that looms behind it. To its south lies the massive temple of the Feathered Serpent, adorned once with sculpted serpents, whose eyes and fangs still gleam in weathered stone. Together, these monuments formed a triad, shaping Teotihuacan into a living cosmos of stone and ritual. The Avenue of the Dead tied them together, a grand boulevard where processions likely moved like rivers of humanity, reenacting cosmic cycles upon the earth. Still, questions echo. Who ruled here? No palaces have been found, no thrones, no names preserved in hieroglyphic texts. Teotihuacan seems almost anonymous, its builders leaving no record of kings or dynasties. Some suggest it was governed collectively, a city ruled not by one, but by many. Others believe that the rulers erased themselves deliberately, subsuming individual identity into the identity of the sacred city. To the later Aztec, who found Teotihuacan already abandoned, it was a place of awe and fear. They believed it was here that the gods gathered to sacrifice themselves, igniting the sun that lights the present world. The Pyramid of the Sun, in their eyes, was not merely a monument, but the very axis of creation. Then came the fall. Around 550 CE, Teotihuacan declined. Its monuments were burned, its temples defaced, its people scattered. Archaeologists debate the cause: internal uprising, drought, famine, invasion. But none can say with certainty. The city that had mirrored the cosmos, that had drawn pilgrims from across Mesoamerica, collapsed into silence. Its great pyramid remained, rising from the plain, stripped of color, but unbroken in form. Today, the Pyramid of the Sun endures as both monument and mystery. Tourists climb its steps, archaeologists probe its depths, yet the voice of its builders remains silent. We walk its avenues as the Aztec once did, as pilgrims from across centuries have done, feeling the weight of a place too vast, too deliberate, to be reduced to a single explanation. Was it temple, tomb, calendar, or gateway? Perhaps all, perhaps more. Beneath its mass, in the tunnels where mercury once shimmered like rivers of the underworld, we sense that Teotihuacan's vision of the cosmos was not ours to inherit fully. It remains a secret, sealed in stone, whispered only in fragments, and as the sun sets behind its silhouette, the pyramid darkens into shadow, its stairways fading into the night. Stars emerge overhead, tracing the same skies that guided its builders. The city lies silent, but its presence lingers, as if the stones themselves remember, even when memory has passed beyond the reach of words. Chapter 9. The lost city of Mohenjo-Daro. Beneath the dusty plains of modern-day Pakistan lies one of humanity's most haunting enigmas, the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, the Mound of the Dead. Rising around 2500 BCE as part of the Indus Valley civilization, this city was once home to tens of thousands of people. Today, its silent bricks and broken walls whisper fragments of a story without words, for the language of its people has never been deciphered. Mohenjo-Daro challenges our very understanding of the ancient world. Long before Greece raised its temples or Rome paved its roads, here stood a city of startling sophistication, one that seems at once strangely familiar and utterly alien. Walking its excavated streets today, one cannot help but feel the ghostly presence of an advanced society whose identity remains locked behind mute ruins. A city of order and precision. At first glance, Mohenjo-Daro may appear as a maze of crumbling mud brick walls and low mounds, but step closer and a remarkable design emerges. The city was laid out on a grid system, centuries before similar planning appeared in the Western world. Straight streets intersected at right angles, dividing neighborhoods into carefully organized blocks. Even more astonishing was its drainage system. Beneath the city ran a network of covered sewers, brick-lined channels that carried wastewater away from homes and public baths. Some houses had private wells, and nearly every dwelling included bathrooms with drains that fed directly into the larger sewer system. Such sanitation would not be seen again in many parts of the world until the 19th century. There is no monumental palace dominating Mohenjo-Daro, no vast ziggurat towering above. Instead, the heart of the city was communal, the Great Bath, a massive public pool built of baked brick and sealed with bitumen to make it watertight. Steps descended into the pool from multiple sides, suggesting rituals of cleansing, perhaps both physical and spiritual. Around it stood halls and courtyards where gatherings may have taken place. Here, power did not seem to radiate from kings or pharaohs. The Indus people appear to have built a society less focused on monuments to rulers, and more upon order, shared systems, and perhaps an ideology that valued balance and unity. Yet without their written records, we can only speculate. The silent script scattered among the ruins are small steatite seals, engraved with strange symbols and images of animals, unicorn-like creatures, bulls, elephants, and tigers. These are the remnants of the Indus script, a system of writing that stubbornly defies decipherment. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs or Sumerian cuneiform, which were cracked thanks to bilingual texts like the Rosetta Stone, the Indus script offers no such key. The inscriptions are short, often only a handful of signs, leaving scholars uncertain whether they represent a full language, a proto-script, or symbolic notations. What was written on these seals? Were they names of merchants, religious symbols, prayers, decrees? Each seal feels like a locked door to the civilization's soul. Without their voice, Mohenjo-Daro's people remain like shadows moving silently across their own streets. A world-connected archaeology suggests that Mohenjo-Daro was not isolated. Its standardized weights and measures indicate a sophisticated system of trade and administration. Beads of carnelian, ornaments of lapis lazuli, and cotton textiles reveal a thriving craft industry. Some goods reached as far as Mesopotamia, where records describe trade with a mysterious land called Meluha, widely believed to be the Indus Valley. This was no small village hidden from the world. It was part of a network of exchange, linking civilizations across continents. Yet unlike Sumer or Egypt, Mohenjo-Daro left behind no kings, no wars etched in stone, no monuments to boast of conquest. Its story feels deliberately humble, as if it lived in the rhythm of daily life rather than the drama of empire. The sudden silence. And yet, at some unknown point, the city fell silent. By around 1900 BCE, the Indus civilization declined and Mohenjo-Daro was abandoned. The reasons remain elusive. Some point to climate change, the shifting of rivers, prolonged droughts, or floods that undermined agriculture. Others suggest invasion, perhaps by Indo-Aryan groups moving into the subcontinent. More sensational theories propose a sudden catastrophe. Excavations uncovered human skeletons lying in streets, some in positions suggesting sudden death. Early interpretations fueled speculation of violent attacks, or even more bizarrely, ancient atomic-like destruction. The latter theory, though lacking archaeological support, continues to captivate alternative historians. They point to traces of vitrified soil, stone fused by extreme heat, as evidence of some forgotten cataclysm. Mainstream archaeology disputes such claims, attributing them to natural processes. Yet the idea persists, a testament to how the silence of Mohenjo-Daro invites imagination to fill the gaps. The mystery of memory, what is perhaps most haunting about Mohenjo-Daro, is not just its fall, but its erasure from memory. When Egypt's pyramids still gleamed under the desert sun, when Mesopotamian scribes recorded their kings, the Indus Valley civilization faded into oblivion. For millennia, no one remembered it existed. Only in the 1920s did archaeologists, digging into dusty mounds along the Indus River, uncover its streets again. Unlike Rome or Babylon, which lived on in myth and story, Mohenjo-Daro slipped beneath the sands of time without a whisper. The people who built baths and sewers, who carved seals and traded with distant lands, became ghosts, their names never spoken again, echoes in the dust today. As the hot winds sweep across the site, the bricks of Mohenjo-Daro crumble further each year. Preservation efforts struggle against erosion, groundwater, and neglect. The city seems to be fading once more, this time before the eyes of the modern world. And yet, standing among its ruins, one cannot shake the feeling that Mohenjo-Daro still holds secrets. Perhaps beneath unexcavated mounds lie tablets waiting to be discovered. Tablets that could finally give voice to the silent script. Perhaps the Indus people were philosophers, astronomers, spiritual visionaries, or simply pragmatic builders of a better life. For now, all we can do is walk the empty streets and imagine. Imagine the sound of water flowing through its drains. Imagine children running down straight avenues. Imagine rituals at the Great Bath, where the surface of the water reflected firelight and stars. Mohenjo-Daro is both a city of facts and a city of dreams. It is the reminder that human civilization does not progress in a straight line, but in bursts of brilliance, sometimes lost, sometimes remembered, and in the dust of its ruins. The question lingers: what other voices of the past still lie buried, waiting to speak? Chapter 10. The Library of Alexandria, in the bustling port city of Alexandria, founded by Alexander the Great's successors, stood a building that sought to contain the very essence of human civilization. Not a temple, nor a palace, but something far more daring, the Library of Alexandria. Built in the 3rd century BCE under the patronage of the Ptolemies, the library was more than a repository of scrolls. It was a bold declaration that all knowledge of the world could be gathered in one place, preserved, and studied for the betterment of humankind. Its shelves, stretching endlessly in the imagination, may have held hundreds of thousands of works, texts from Egypt, Mesopotamia, Greece, India, and perhaps lands beyond. The library became a beacon of learning, drawing scholars, mathematicians, physicians, astronomers, and poets. Here, Euclid may have refined his geometry, Archimedes his mathematics, and early physicians their understanding of the body. Yet it is not what we know the library contained that haunts us. It is what was lost. A house of all knowledge, the Ptolemaic kings, eager to make Alexandria the intellectual capital of the world, sent agents across the Mediterranean with a mission: acquire every text in existence. Ships docking in Alexandria's harbour were searched, their manuscripts copied or seized outright to add to the growing collection. Imagine shelves lined with the epics of Homer beside the wisdom of Egyptian priests. Imagine Babylonian star charts lying next to Indian treatises on medicine. Imagine Phoenician records of distant voyages, or maps drawn by sailors who traced coastlines long forgotten. In this convergence of cultures, the library became not just a storehouse, but a crucible where ideas could mix, collide, and ignite. Here, Greek philosophy met Eastern cosmology. Egyptian engineering mingled with Mesopotamian astronomy. Knowledge became a living thing, alive in translation, commentary, and debate. What might have been. And yet, the true power of the Library of Alexandria lies not in what we know, but in what we can only imagine. What texts might have been shelved there that never reached our modern eyes? Did the library hold lost plays of Sophocles and Aeschylus, entire bodies of literature of which only fragments remain? Did it preserve the mathematical breakthroughs of ancient India, centuries before they appeared in other lands? Did it contain maps suggesting knowledge of lands far beyond the Mediterranean world? Some whisper that records of Atlantis or other lost civilizations could have been among its scrolls. Others imagine treatises on technologies long forgotten, sciences centuries ahead of their time. The library may have been the bridge between the mythic past and recorded history, one that burned away before humanity could cross. The mystery of its destruction, the tragedy of the Library of Alexandria, is not just that it was destroyed, but that we do not even know how or when. Some point to Julius Caesar, who in 48 BCE set fire to ships in Alexandria's harbour. The flames spread to nearby buildings, and ancient accounts suggest the library suffered losses. Others argue the real destruction came centuries later under the Christian emperor Theophilus in 391 CE, when pagan temples were demolished. Still others place the blame on the Muslim conquest in the 7th century, when, according to some accounts, the remaining scrolls were used as fuel for the city's baths. Each story carries weight, yet none is conclusive. Perhaps the truth is more mundane. The library was not destroyed in a single night of fire, but dwindled over centuries. Scrolls rotting, scholars scattering, knowledge slipping quietly into oblivion. And so the image of flames consuming shelves of wisdom may be more metaphor than fact, a symbol for the greater tragedy that humanity allowed its greatest treasure to vanish. Echoes of what was lost, even without the library's scrolls, fragments of its influence survived. The very idea of Alexandria as a seat of knowledge inspired later centers of learning, Baghdad's House of Wisdom, the great libraries of Cordoba and Constantinople, and eventually the Renaissance, but still, a sense of haunting remains. Had the Library of Alexandria endured, would our history look different? Would the Dark Ages have been lit by knowledge centuries earlier? Would medicine, astronomy, and philosophy have leapt forward by millennia? The question is unanswerable, yet it lingers like a ghost. What shape might our world have taken if we had inherited all that once was? The eternal symbol today, on the shores of Alexandria, stands the Bibliotheca Alexandrina, a modern library built as a tribute to the ancient dream. Its circular design evokes the rising sun, a symbol of knowledge reborn. Inside, scholars once again gather, manuscripts are preserved, and digital archives reach across the globe. Yet the ancient library remains more than just a historical site. It is a symbol, a wound, and a warning. A reminder of how fragile knowledge can be, how easily the wisdom of generations can slip through our fingers. The Library of Alexandria may be gone, but its shadow still stretches across time. It reminds us that civilization is not just built of stone and mortar, but of ideas, and that when ideas are lost, the very foundations of our future tremble. As we close our eyes and picture its endless halls, we hear not the silence of absence, but the faint rustle of scrolls turning, the low murmur of voices in debate, the promise of discoveries just beyond reach. And we are left with the most haunting thought of all. Perhaps the greatest secrets of the ancient world were not buried in ruins or deserts, but burned into ash, lost forever to the flames of Alexandria. Chapter 11. The Antikythera Mechanism beneath the restless waters of the Aegean Sea, near the small Greek island of Antikythera, divers once descended in search of sponges. It was the spring of 1900, and what they discovered would ripple through the very foundations of history. Resting within the ruins of a Roman-era shipwreck, amid statues of marble, amphorae, and corroded bronze, lay fragments of something utterly unexpected, a device of gears and dials, encrusted with centuries of salt and silence. At first glance, it appeared unremarkable, merely a broken lump of metal, yet hidden within its corroded plates were fine-toothed wheels, delicate inscriptions, and interlocking components crafted with a precision that should not have existed in the world of 2,000 years ago. When painstakingly studied, the fragments revealed themselves as part of something astonishing, a bronze machine, built around 100 BCE, capable of calculating the movements of the heavens. The Antikythera Mechanism, as it came to be called, is regarded by many as the world's first known analog computer. It was no simple timekeeper, but a device of extraordinary complexity. More than 30 gears of differing sizes were arranged to work in perfect harmony, transferring motion from one to another in an elegant chain. When its hand crank was turned, the machine came alive. Dials rotated, pointers swept across scales, and the mysteries of the sky unfolded before human eyes. It could predict eclipses with astonishing accuracy, track the cycles of the moon, and model the wandering paths of the known planets. For the scholars of its age, this was not mere ornament. It was a key to the structure of the cosmos, inscriptions carved into the plates, faint but still legible, reference cycles known from Babylonian astronomy, combined with the mathematical insights of the Greeks. Its design seems to be a marriage of traditions, a blending of cultures and sciences that cross seas just as the ship that carried it once had. The very existence of such a device suggests a lineage of technological knowledge far older and more advanced than the surviving record allows. The discovery unsettled the boundaries of history. For centuries, it was believed that gears of such precision, gears capable of mimicking celestial motions, did not exist until the clockmakers of medieval Europe, nearly 1500 years later. Yet here, corroded and silent, was proof that the ancients had already achieved such mastery, and perhaps had gone even further. The questions multiply with every turn of its gears. Who built it? Was it the work of a lone genius, or the culmination of a hidden tradition of craftsmanship and science? Some suggest it may have been constructed in Rhodes, a center of astronomical study in the Hellenistic world, possibly under the influence of Hipparchus, the famed Greek astronomer who lived in the 2nd century BCE. Others wonder if it was the product of an unknown workshop whose works have perished without a trace. The shipwreck that preserved it may have been its coffin as well as its messenger, ensuring that all other devices of its kind were lost to sea and time. Modern imaging has peeled back the layers of corrosion, revealing inscriptions that function almost like an instruction manual describing its operation. They speak of cycles spanning decades, of eclipses, of Olympic games. This was no trinket for kings, but a practical tool for those who sought to understand or perhaps even control the rhythms of heaven. It may have been used to guide rituals, to predict auspicious dates, or to teach students the hidden order of the cosmos. Its very existence suggests that ancient people were not merely gazing at the stars in wonder, but were building machines to replicate their dance. And yet, one cannot help but feel a sense of loss. If this one machine survived only by accident, how many others were made? Was this the pinnacle of an age of forgotten engineering, or a solitary spark that burned out in isolation? Did other devices, perhaps even more intricate, vanish in the fires of libraries, or in the silence of the seas? The Antikythera Mechanism whispers of a world that once existed, a world where technology and cosmology were entwined in ways that remain elusive to us. Standing before it today, in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, one sees not a grand and imposing artifact like the Pyramids or Stonehenge, but something humbler, smaller, and in its way, more haunting. For it does not overwhelm by scale, but by implication. It is not a monument to what we know, but a question mark pointing to what has been forgotten. Even now, scholars continue to reconstruct it, building models in brass and wood, attempting to coax it back to life. And as the gears turn once more, we catch a fleeting glimpse of the minds who once walked the ancient world, minds who saw the cosmos as a pattern that could be measured, mirrored, and held in the palm of one's hand. It reminds us that history is not a straight path of progress, but a fragile record, full of ruptures and erasures. The Antikythera Mechanism may be a survivor from a chapter of human achievement we no longer remember. Its siblings long perished, their voices stilled. As we watch the reconstructed gears tick forward, predicting eclipses of centuries past, we are left with a haunting thought. If such knowledge existed in antiquity, how much else has been lost? How many sciences, philosophies, and inventions fell into silence with the fall of empires, or burned with the libraries that once guarded them? Perhaps the Antikythera Mechanism is not only a machine of bronze, but also a reminder that the past is far richer, stranger, and more fragile than we dare to imagine. And so it waits, under glass, corroded yet eternal, its gears frozen in mid-turn. Not merely an artifact, but a question cast in metal. Not merely a relic, but a whisper from a forgotten world. It leaves us with the uneasy sense that we are not the first to walk close to the edge of the infinite, nor will we be the last. And in that silence, the mechanism continues its eternal work, guarding the memory of knowledge once held, then lost, and perhaps one day found again. Chapter 12. Easter Island's Moai statues far out in the vastness of the Pacific Ocean, thousands of miles from the nearest continental shore, lies a speck of land known as Rapa Nui, Easter Island. Remote, windswept, and encircled by restless waves, it is one of the most isolated inhabited places on Earth. And yet, on this island of volcanic rock and sparse vegetation, humanity left behind one of its most haunting legacies, the colossal Moai statues. These stone giants, carved between the 13th and 16th centuries, rise in silent ranks across the island. Their faces stern, their backs turned to the sea, as though forever watching over the land and the people who once raised them. The Moai are not uniform. Some stand only a few feet tall, while others soar over 30 feet, with the largest weighing more than 80 tons. Carved from compressed volcanic tuff in the quarry of Rano Raraku, their sheer size makes them improbable creations for a society with no beasts of burden, no metal tools, and limited resources. Yet the islanders not only shaped them with astonishing skill, but transported them for miles across rugged terrain. How this was achieved remains a puzzle. Some theories suggest that they were rolled on logs, others that they were walked upright by ropes in a rocking motion, a feat requiring both precision and communal coordination. Recent experiments have shown that such walking could indeed be possible, lending a strange animation to the statues themselves, as if they strode toward their platforms to take their place as guardians of the island. Most Moai are not freestanding. They were placed upon ceremonial platforms called ahu, which often contained the remains of ancestors. To the people of Rapa Nui, the statues embodied ancestral mana, spiritual power, and thus served as conduits between the living and the dead. With their gaze fixed inland, they did not watch the sea for threats, but instead looked over the villages, fields, and people who depended on their protection. In this way, the island itself became a sacred landscape, where stone and spirit converged. But the story of the Moai is not only one of devotion. It is also entangled with the fragile ecology of the island. Traditional accounts speak of a society that fell into decline through overuse of its resources, felling the great palms that once covered the island to transport statues, until the soil eroded, crops failed, and warfare erupted. The Moai, in this telling, became monuments to excess, symbols of a culture that collapsed under its own weight. For years, this narrative was repeated as a cautionary tale about human folly. Yet new evidence complicates that story. Archaeologists now suggest that the deforestation of Rapa Nui was gradual and driven as much by introduced species, such as the Polynesian rat, as by human activity. Far from collapsing into chaos, the islanders appear to have adapted with resilience, cultivating crops in stone gardens that protected fragile soils and continued building Moai even in later centuries. The idea of sudden societal collapse may owe more to the shock of European contact, disease, enslavement, and colonial disruption, than to the statues themselves. In this light, the Moai are not symbols of ruin, but of endurance. The mystery, however, remains layered. Why devote so much energy to raising statues of such scale? Why pour the strength of an entire society into stone forms, whose silent gaze still pierces the present? The answers lie partly in the worldview of Polynesia itself, where ancestors are ever present, guiding and protecting the living. To carve a Moai was to give shape to the invisible, to root spiritual power into the land. Each face, with its solemn features and elongated form, was unique, carrying the essence of a lineage or a chief. In standing them upon Ahu, the people of Rapa Nui were not merely honoring the past, they were ensuring the future. Yet the statues also provoke questions about memory and loss. Many Moai never reached their platforms. Dozens remain half-carved in the quarry as though work had been suddenly abandoned. Others lie toppled, victims of conflict or perhaps ritual decommissioning. Some wear red stone headdresses, known as pukao, whose origins and symbolism remain debated. Were they markers of rank, crowns of divine authority, or echoes of the sacred topknots once worn by island chiefs? Each unanswered question deepens the aura of enigma. In the modern era, the Moai stand as cultural survivors. Though many were pulled down in past centuries, the people of Rapa Nui continue to honor them as part of their living heritage. Excavations reveal that many Moai are not merely heads and torsos, as often imagined, but have buried bodies extending deep into the earth, inscribed with petroglyphs. The giants are larger, older and more complex than casual observers suspect, guardians still half hidden beneath layers of time. And so the Moai endure, weathering salt winds and the long loneliness of the Pacific. They are not ruins in the ordinary sense, for they still embody a link between the living islanders and their ancestors. They speak of ingenuity, of faith, of a community's ability to shape stone into spirit. Yet they also whisper of the fragility of isolation, of how cultural achievements stand always on the edge of survival when nature and history conspire against them. As the sun sets over Rapa Nui, the shadows of the Moai stretch long across the earth, their faces still turned inward, watching a land that remembers them as kin. To gaze upon them is to feel the presence of a people who refuse to let their ancestors fade into silence, even if it meant carving their memory into mountains of stone. But beneath their solemn watch, questions remain of how they walked, why they were raised, and what stories were lost when the voices of Rapa Nui were silenced by forces from beyond the horizon. The Moai stand still, but they are not silent. They remind us that even in the remotest corners of the world, humanity has always sought permanence in the face of impermanence. They leave us with a lingering wonder. Were these stone giants monuments to the past, or messages to the future? Waiting, even now, for us to finally understand. Chapter 13, the Yonaguni Monument in Japan. Beneath the restless waters off the southern coast of Japan, near the island of Yonaguni, lies a mystery that has stirred fascination and controversy for nearly 4 decades. At first glance, it appears to be nothing more than a series of immense stone formations, concealed beneath the sea and slowly reclaimed by coral and current. But a closer look reveals something different. Terraces that resemble giant steps, angular passageways, and walls that seem too precise, too geometric, to be the casual work of nature. The Yonaguni Monument was first brought to global attention in 1987, when a local diver named Kihachiro Aratake encountered its looming shapes while exploring the seabed. What he found was astonishing. Massive stone blocks rising from the ocean floor, connected by flat platforms, corridors, and sharp-angled stairways that seemed to climb upward like a drowned temple. Word spread quickly, and soon scientists, divers, and theorists descended upon Yonaguni, hoping to unravel whether this structure was a natural wonder or the sunken handiwork of a forgotten civilization. The monument is vast, stretching nearly 500 feet in length and 90 feet in height, with flat terraces that resemble carefully cut steps. Some of its walls rise in sheer planes, while others angle neatly into corners, as though hewn by tools. There are what appear to be archways, broad plazas, and even a formation some describe as a pyramid. To the untrained eye, the impression is unmistakable. A city swallowed by the sea, preserved in silence beneath shifting tides. Yet appearances can deceive. Many geologists argue that the monument is a natural formation, the product of sandstone layers fracturing along fault lines. The seas around Yonaguni are notorious for earthquakes, and over thousands of years, tectonic shifts could have created the sharp angles and block-like structures now visible underwater. According to this view, the monument is an illusion of design, nature shaping stone in ways that mimic the geometry of human architecture. But others remain unconvinced. Marine geologist Masaki Kimura, who has studied the site extensively, points to features that, in his view, cannot be explained by geology alone. Straight roads stretching for tens of meters, staircases leading upward in deliberate fashion, and stone outcrops resembling carvings of animals and faces. Kimura suggests that the monument could be remnants of a city or ceremonial, center dating back more than 10,000 years, an era when sea levels were much lower and vast stretches of land now drowned were still dry. If true, this would place the Yonaguni Monument among the oldest known human structures on Earth, predating even the pyramids of Egypt and challenging the accepted timeline of civilization. The possibility is tantalizing. Around the end of the last ice age, rising seas engulfed coastlines across the globe, swallowing countless settlements. Could Yonaguni be a remnant of such a world, an echo of a people who thrived before history began? The monument's sheer size and apparent design suggest not just survival, but organization, an advanced culture capable of planning and constructing on a monumental scale. Yet no tools, artifacts, or definitive signs of habitation have been recovered from the site. leaving the debate suspended between wonder and skepticism. Divers who visit Yonaguni often describe a strange sense of awe as they glide through its corridors. Sunlight filters down in shifting beams, illuminating broad steps that vanish into shadow. Fish dart through crevices that look like doorways. The silence of the deep magnifies the uncanny impression of walking through a drowned city, abandoned but not forgotten. It is as though the sea itself has become the guardian of a secret too immense to reveal. Critics caution against letting imagination outrun evidence. They note that human eyes are naturally inclined to see patterns in chaos, to impose meaning on shapes. Just as faces appear in clouds or animals in stone, so too might our minds transform geological fractures into temples and stairways. Without proof, artifacts, inscriptions, or other cultural traces, the monument cannot be declared human in origin. Yet this skepticism has not silenced speculation. Some propose that Yonaguni was part of the legendary lost continent of Mu, a Pacific counterpart to Atlantis. Others see it as a ceremonial site belonging to an unknown maritime culture, one whose memory was washed away with the rising seas. The very lack of certainty fuels its allure, inviting divers, scholars, and dreamers to project their own narratives onto the silent stones. In the end, the Yonaguni monument stands as both enigma and mirror. It may be the grand architecture of an Ice Age civilization, its story buried beneath millennia of tides. Or it may be a masterpiece of geology, proof that nature itself can sculpt wonders beyond imagination. Either way, it forces us to confront the limits of our knowledge and the fragility of human memory. Beneath the waves, the monument endures. Whether palace, quarry, or natural sculpture, it remains untouched by time's passage, shrouded in currents and coral. Its broad steps lead nowhere now. Its corridors open into silence, but its mystery is undiminished. The sea has claimed it, yet it still speaks to us, reminding us that not all stories are written in books or carved into stone. Some are whispered by the ocean, waiting for those willing to descend into its depths and listen. The Yonaguni monument is, in the end, a question of origins, of memory, of what we dare to believe about the past. And like all great questions, it lingers, haunting, unresolved, and profoundly human. Chapter 14, The Dead Sea. Scrolls in the barren cliffs above the Dead Sea, where silence stretches unbroken, and the air itself seems heavy with salt. One of the greatest archaeological discoveries of the 20th century came to light. It began in 1947, almost by accident. A Bedouin shepherd, searching for a stray goat among the caves of Qumran, stumbled across clay jars sealed for nearly 2,000 years. Inside them lay ancient scrolls, fragile, brittle, yet astonishingly preserved. What he had uncovered would change forever the study of the Bible, Judaism, and the world of the ancient Near East. The discovery sparked an intense wave of exploration. Archaeologists, scholars, and locals combed the caves, and soon more manuscripts were brought to light. Over the next decade, in 11 caves surrounding Qumran, fragments of nearly 900 different scrolls were found. Some were entire texts written neatly on parchment. Others were tiny shards, torn and blackened with age, demanding patient reconstruction. Together, they formed a library hidden away between roughly 250 BCE and 70 CE, a collection of sacred writings sealed against the ravages of time. Among these texts are some of the oldest known copies of the Hebrew Bible. The Book of Isaiah appears almost complete, its words rolling across columns of script with a startling familiarity, yet written more than 1,000 years earlier than any previously known biblical manuscript. Alongside it lie fragments of Genesis, Psalms, Deuteronomy, books central to Jewish and Christian tradition. To scholars, these scrolls offered a window into how scripture was transmitted, preserved, and interpreted in antiquity. But the scrolls contained more than biblical texts. Hymns, prayers, and legal writings emerged, revealing the spiritual life of a community both rooted in tradition and searching for renewal. There were apocalyptic visions, foretelling battles of light against darkness, and commentaries interpreting scripture in ways that suggested urgency, expectation, and a world poised on the edge of transformation. Some texts describe a teacher of righteousness, a mysterious leader who guided the community but also faced fierce opposition. Others speak of hidden laws, secret wisdom, and the coming of a messianic figure who would restore order in an age of corruption. the question of authorship soon rose to the surface. Who had written, copied, and hidden these scrolls? Many scholars argue that they were the work of the Essenes, a sect of Judaism known from the writings of Philo, Josephus, and Pliny the Elder. The Essenes were described as ascetics who lived in the desert, devoted to purity, study, and awaiting divine intervention. The ruins of Qumran itself, its ritual baths, communal dining halls, and scribal rooms seem to echo this description, as though the scrolls were the library of a sectarian brotherhood seeking to preserve its vision of truth. Yet certainty eludes us. Some argue that the scrolls represent a broader collection of writings gathered from multiple Jewish groups, hidden away during the upheavals of the Roman conquest. Others suggest they were stored by dissidents, guardians of esoteric teachings deliberately concealed from mainstream tradition. The identity of the teacher of righteousness remains obscure, and whether he was a historical figure, a symbolic archetype, or both is still debated. The scrolls themselves whisper of conflict. They speak of persecution, of betrayal, of enemies both within and without. They frame history as a cosmic struggle, casting their community as the sons of light, battling the sons of darkness. This dualistic vision resonates with later religious thought, hinting at connections that ripple through Judaism, Christianity, and even Gnostic traditions. But perhaps what is most remarkable is not what we know, but what we cannot know. Many scrolls are fragmentary, broken into thousands of pieces, their words tantalizingly incomplete. Scholars spend decades reassembling them, yet entire passages remain missing, leaving us to guess at their meaning. What secrets were lost when jars shattered, when parchment decayed, when time itself erased the ink of memory? The survival of the Dead Sea Scrolls feels almost miraculous. For centuries, these fragile manuscripts endured in darkness, preserved by the dry desert air and sealed away from human hands. Their emergence in the modern world coincided with a moment when archaeology, technology, and global interest could converge to study them. And yet, their arrival was not without controversy. The early decades of their discovery were marked by secrecy and dispute. A small circle of scholars controlled access, fueling suspicion that the scrolls contained revelations too dangerous or disruptive for the public. Conspiracy theories flourished. Whispers that the scrolls concealed hidden gospels, forbidden teachings, or knowledge that might overturn established faiths. While most of these claims have not borne out, the atmosphere of secrecy left a lingering aura of mystery, one that still clings to the scrolls today. With the advent of digital imaging and infrared photography, once illegible fragments have been revealed. Letters invisible to the naked eye now emerge, line by line, from parchment darkened by centuries. Yet each discovery raises further questions. What texts remain unread in private collections? How much more lies hidden, either in caves not yet explored or in fragments too damaged to restore? The Dead Sea Scrolls are both revelation and riddle. They confirm the antiquity of the Hebrew scriptures, while also showing the diversity and fluidity of religious thought in the centuries before and after the birth of Christianity. They anchor tradition in history, yet also remind us that much of that history is still obscured. Standing in the caves of Qumran, one can almost feel the weight of the past pressing against the silence. The jagged cliffs look down over the lifeless expanse of the Dead Sea, a place where nothing grows, where salt and stone dominate the horizon. It is here that scribes bent over parchment by lamplight, copying words they believed eternal, hiding them away as armies advanced, as temples burned, as their world collapsed. And yet, in our age, their words have returned. Not all of them, not complete, but enough to remind us that beneath the familiar surface of history runs a deeper current of sects and visions, of hidden teachers and vanishing traditions. The scrolls, like broken voices carried on the desert wind, do not give us final answers. They give us glimpses, fragments, and questions that reach beyond faith and scholarship into the heart of mystery itself. Even now, as scholars pore over every line, the sense remains that something vital is missing, not only from the texts themselves, but from our understanding of the age that produced them. Perhaps the scrolls were never meant to reveal everything. Perhaps they are what they have always been, fragments of a larger truth, carefully hidden, waiting for generations not yet born to discover them anew. And so the caves remain, their silence heavy with secrets. The scrolls speak, but only in part, and in the spaces between the words, in the gaps, and the silences. They leave us with a haunting reminder that history is never whole, and that even the most sacred knowledge can be both revealed and concealed all at once. Chapter 15. The Copper Scroll. Treasure. In the dusty caves of Qumran, where fragments of ancient scripture were preserved in silence for nearly 2 millennia, one scroll stands apart from all the rest. Unlike the delicate parchment and papyrus fragments written in ink, this document was etched onto thin sheets of hammered copper, rolled tightly and sealed within a jar. When archaeologists discovered it in 1952, they knew at once that it was different, heavier, more durable, and far more enigmatic than anything else retrieved from the desert cliffs. What they unrolled was not a hymn, not a prayer, not even an interpretation of Holy Scripture. It was a list. Line after line recorded places, measurements, and descriptions of hidden deposits, 70 in total, said to contain staggering amounts of gold, silver, and sacred vessels. The Copper Scroll, scholars realized, read less like a sacred text and more like an inventory, a treasure map inscribed not in symbols or parables, but in practical detail. The language itself seemed direct, almost unpoetic, a stark contrast to the apocalyptic visions and hymns of the other scrolls. It spoke of 40 talents of silver buried under specific ruins, of 70 talents of silver vessels stored beneath certain structures, of caches hidden in cisterns, aqueducts, and even beneath the steps of sanctuaries. If the measurements are taken literally, the wealth described amounts to many tons of precious metals, an unimaginable fortune for any era. Yet the most remarkable mystery lies not only in what the Copper Scroll records, but in why it was written at all. Some suggest it describes the treasury of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, concealed before Roman legions swept through Judea in the 1st century. Others believe it may have belonged to a sectarian group such as the Essenes, who sought to safeguard their sacred wealth during times of upheaval. Still others argue that it records treasure that never existed, its words symbolic of spiritual riches rather than physical ones. But unlike allegorical texts, the Copper Scroll resists easy dismissal. Its specificity, down to the cubits of depth, the names of valleys, and the features of water channels, has convinced many that it was meant to be read as a practical guide. This is no parable. It is a map, though one whose landmarks have been obscured by time, erosion, and the shifting landscape of memory. The scroll itself was found in fragments, corroded and fragile. In order to read it, scholars had to cut the copper sheets into strips, carefully flattening them to reveal the etched letters within. The act itself seemed almost symbolic, as though opening a sealed door into a forgotten treasury of history. When at last the words were revealed, excitement swept across the scholarly world. Had a genuine record of hidden treasure been lying in the desert all this time, waiting for rediscovery? Searches began almost immediately. Archaeologists, adventurers, and treasure hunters scoured the Judean hills, tracing the scroll's cryptic instructions. Yet despite decades of exploration, no confirmed treasure has ever been found. Some argue that the wealth was long since recovered, perhaps by those who originally hid it. Others believe it lies still beneath the earth, sealed away in places where modern excavation cannot reach. And so the Copper Scroll continues to provoke both fascination and frustration. For every claim that it describes real treasure, there is a counterclaim that it cannot possibly be so. Could the quantities of gold and silver truly have existed in Judea at the time? If the scroll refers to temple treasures, why is it so different in form and style from other religious records? And if it was not allegory, then why did no one ever return to reclaim what was hidden? Its presence among the Dead Sea Scrolls only deepens the mystery. The other manuscripts are religious, sectarian, or philosophical in nature. They speak of law, prophecy, and ritual. The Copper Scroll alone speaks of treasure. Did the community at Qumran preserve it deliberately as part of their secret traditions? Or was it hidden there by others, drawn to the caves during an age of war and desperation? Over time, the Copper Scroll has inspired not only academic debate, but also legends. Some link it to the fabled treasures of the First Temple, said to have been lost when Babylon destroyed Jerusalem in the 6th century BCE. Others tie it to the Ark of the Covenant or other sacred relics, imagining that the scroll is but one surviving record of vast hidden caches scattered across the ancient world. Such theories, while speculative, highlight the aura of myth that surrounds the text, and yet, for all the speculation, the Copper Scroll remains stubbornly silent. Its words are clear enough. but the landscape they describe may have shifted beyond recognition. Valleys eroded, water channels diverted, and ancient structures long since crumbled. To follow the scroll's directions is to chase shadows across a desert that has changed with time, where the landmarks of memory have been swallowed by centuries of silence. Still, its very existence tells us something profound. Here, etched into unyielding metal, lies evidence of human hands trying to preserve a secret. Whether that secret was a hoard of wealth or a symbol of divine abundance, we may never know. What matters is that those who created the copper scroll believed it vital enough to record in the most durable medium they had, ensuring it would endure where parchment might fail. And so it has. Across the gulf of centuries, it has reached us. A voice not of prophets or poets, but of scribes cataloguing hidden wealth. A list that whispers of war, of concealment, of a people who feared their treasures would be lost, yet hoped one day they might be recovered. Today, the copper scroll sits in a museum studied and admired, yet unresolved. Its lines continue to inspire both scholarly analysis and quiet dreams of discovery. Somewhere beneath the sands and stones of Judea, perhaps something still waits. Or perhaps the treasure was never of this world, and its true meaning lies beyond the reach of gold and silver. In the end, the copper scroll leaves us where it began, in the realm between fact and myth, history and legend. It is a document that does not explain itself, but instead lingers as an unanswered question. Its treasures, whether earthly or symbolic, remain hidden, and in that hiddenness lies its enduring power. To remind us that even within the libraries of antiquity, there are texts that do not reveal, but conceal, and so the copper plates remain, unrolled but unresolved, their words heavy with possibility. They speak of treasure, but leave us with mystery, a mystery that, like the desert itself, resists the grasp of certainty, holding its secrets in silence until time itself chooses to reveal them. Chapter 16. The lost city of Petra in the desert lands of southern Jordan. Beyond the windswept valleys and towering sandstone ridges lies a city carved not from brick nor from marble, but from living rock itself. Known to the ancients as Rakhmu, but remembered today as Petra, this rose-red city emerges suddenly from the cliffs like a vision suspended between history and myth. Its facades catch the sun with colors of fire and blood, crimson and gold, earning it the name a rose-red city, half as old as time. Petra was more than a city. It was a gateway between empires, between deserts and fertile lands, between worlds both earthly and divine. From the 4th century BCE, it flourished as the capital of the Nabateans, a people once dismissed as nomads and traders, but who revealed themselves instead as master engineers, architects, and visionaries. Yet just as quickly as Petra rose, it vanished, leaving behind only its silent cliffs, its hollowed tombs, and questions that scholars still struggle to answer. The approach to Petra is as theatrical as the city itself. To reach it, one passes through the Sek, a narrow gorge nearly a mile long, its walls soaring high above, twisted and striped in hues of red, pink, and ochre. The Sik is no ordinary canyon. It was shaped by tectonic forces, but the Nabateans transformed it into a sacred passage. Water channels were cut along its length, ensuring the lifeblood of the city flowed even into the desert. For the traveler of antiquity, each step through the Sik must have felt like a slow unveiling, a ritual journey toward revelation. And then, at its end, the walls part suddenly to reveal Al-Khazna, the treasury, Petra's most iconic monument, hewn directly into the sandstone, its columns and pediments gleaming like something descended from Olympus. Yet for all its grandeur, the treasury's true purpose remains contested. Some suggest it was a mausoleum for a Nabatean king, others a temple, and local folklore tells of treasure hidden within, sealed behind the stone. The bullet holes still visible on its facade, fired by Bedouin in search of riches, speak to this enduring belief. The truth, however, lies hidden within the silence of its chambers. Beyond the treasury stretches the heart of Petra, a sprawling city of tombs, temples, colonnaded streets, and amphitheaters, all carved directly from the cliffs. Here stood the great theatre, capable of seating thousands, where Greek drama and local ritual may have mingled under the desert sky. Here too stood the Qasr al-Bint, one of Petra's few freestanding stone structures, a great temple that may have been dedicated to Dushara, the chief deity of the Nabateans. The gods of Petra were many, linked to fertility, water, mountains, and stars. Their shrines, niches, and altars are scattered across the cliffs, reminding us that this was not merely a place of commerce, but also a city of the sacred. The Nabateans themselves are among history's enigmas. They left no grand inscriptions proclaiming their deeds, no annals of kings, no chronicles of battles. Instead, their legacy survives in stone and silence. We know they controlled the vital incense trade routes that carried frankincense and myrrh from Arabia to the Mediterranean. We know they grew wealthy from this commerce, skillfully navigating the deserts with their camel caravans. And we know they mastered the impossible, building a thriving city in one of the driest places on Earth. Petra's water system remains one of its greatest marvels. Channels, aqueducts, cisterns, and dams captured every drop of rainfall, directing it into reservoirs. Even during drought, Petra could sustain tens of thousands of people. The Nabateans turned scarcity into abundance, harnessing the desert itself. To the modern visitor, this mastery feels almost miraculous. Yet, for all their brilliance, the Nabateans left behind more questions than answers. Where did they come from before rising to power? How did their culture develop such distinct art and architecture, blending Hellenistic, Mesopotamian, and local styles into something utterly unique? And why, after centuries of prosperity, did Petra decline? By the 2nd century CE, the Roman Empire annexed Nabatea. Petra continued to thrive for a time, its colonnaded streets lined with Roman-style villas and temples. But gradually, trade shifted elsewhere. Sea routes replaced desert caravans. Earthquakes shattered the city's infrastructure. By the 7th century, Petra had dwindled, its great facades staring blankly into the silence of the desert. The city that once controlled the flow of goods across continents became a forgotten ruin, its name barely whispered beyond the Bedouin tribes who camped among its tombs. For nearly 1,000 years, Petra remained hidden from the outside world. To Western eyes, it was as though it had been swallowed by the earth itself. Travelers spoke of a lost city of stone, guarded jealously by local tribes who knew of its existence but revealed little. It was not until 1812, when the Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt disguised himself as an Arab pilgrim, that Petra re-emerged into modern knowledge. Guided by locals, he passed through the Sikhu and stood before the treasury, recording in awe the city that had slept for centuries. Since then, archaeologists have worked to piece together Petra's story. Excavations have revealed houses, marketplaces, mosaics, and inscriptions, yet so much remains untouched. Beneath the sand and rubble lie countless structures still hidden. Some tombs remain sealed, their interiors unknown. Legends whisper of undiscovered chambers filled with treasures, sacred relics, or scrolls that might alter our understanding of the Nabateans. Even the symbolic alignments of Petra's monuments add to its mystery. Scholars have noted how certain temples and tombs align with the solstices, equinoxes, and cardinal points. At dawn on the winter solstice, sunlight streams through the Sikh to illuminate the treasury, as if by design. Was Petra not only a city of trade, but also a cosmic city, its architecture reflecting the movements of the heavens? Did the Nabateans see themselves as mediators between earth and sky, carving their beliefs into the very bones of the mountains? To wander Petra today is to walk between two worlds. On one hand, it is a city of ghosts, a necropolis of empty facades where silence reigns. On the other, it is a place alive with echoes, of water trickling through ancient channels, of footsteps along colonnaded streets, of prayers murmured in forgotten tongues. The Nabateans are gone, yet their city endures, a monument not only to their ingenuity, but to the fragility of civilizations. And perhaps this is Petra's deepest mystery, that it stands both revealed and concealed. We see its facades, but the lives behind them remain veiled. We marvel at its temples, yet we cannot hear the hymns once sung within. We trace its trade routes, but the full map of its destiny is lost to time. Like the desert that both shelters and erases, Petra guards its secrets in silence. The rose-red city endures not as a solved chapter of history, but as a living riddle, a city half-carved, half-concealed, waiting in the desert's embrace. And as the sun sets over its cliffs, painting the rock with hues of fire, we are left to wonder, did Petra fade by accident of history, or was it meant to remain hidden, a sanctuary of stone, forever keeping its secrets? Chapter 17. The Baghdad Battery, in the dusty hills near Baghdad, sometime in the 1930s, a modest clay jar was lifted from the soil. It was not adorned with intricate carvings, nor shaped like a vessel of ceremonial grandeur. At first glance, It appeared little more than a container, weathered by centuries of silence. Yet within its simple form lay a puzzle that has confounded archaeologists, scientists, and seekers of hidden histories for nearly a century. The object came to light in the village of Kujut Rabu, just outside Baghdad. Excavators unearthed a series of small clay jars, each about 6 inches tall. Inside, some of them were copper cylinders, sealed with asphalt, and an iron rod positioned at the center. The arrangement was peculiar, not decorative, not seemingly ritual, and not easily dismissed as common pottery. When the Austrian archaeologist Wilhelm König examined them in 1938, he proposed something startling, that these jars might have been used as electrochemical cells. In modern terms, they resembled primitive batteries. The notion was met with disbelief. How could such an object exist in Mesopotamia around 200 BCE, long before electricity was understood or harnessed by the modern world? Yet experiments soon followed. Researchers replicated the jars, filling them with acidic liquids, vinegar, lemon juice, even grape juice. To their astonishment, the vessels produced a small but measurable electric current. The so-called Baghdad Battery had sparked to life once more, whispering of a forgotten knowledge. If these jars were indeed batteries, their purpose remains an enigma. Some have suggested they may have been used in medicine, perhaps for electrotherapy, delivering small shocks to the body for healing rituals. Others believe they could have plated objects with thin layers of gold or silver, a technique known to later civilizations. Imagine artisans of antiquity harnessing a hidden spark to gild amulets, jewelry, or ritual objects. Such a possibility stretches our understanding of ancient craft into the realm of lost technology, yet skepticism lingers. Critics argue that the jars may have served entirely different functions: containers for sacred scrolls, vessels for ritual offerings, or simple storage for papyri. The resemblance to a battery, they suggest, might be coincidence, shaped more by modern imagination than ancient intent. Without inscriptions or clear archaeological context, certainty remains elusive. The debate over the Baghdad Battery touches something deeper than the object itself. It opens the larger question of how much the ancients knew and how much has been forgotten. Mesopotamia, after all, was a cradle of invention. It was here that writing first etched its signs into clay, that mathematics measured the stars, that kings raised ziggurats to brush the heavens. Could it be so unthinkable that they experimented with natural forces in ways now obscured by time? The jar also reminds us of the fragility of memory. So much of ancient technology has been lost, not through lack of brilliance, but through war, conquest, and decay. Libraries burned, cities crumbled, generations passed without the transmission of certain secrets. What remains to us are fragments, like this small clay vessel, inviting us to imagine an entire spectrum of possibilities. In the quiet of the museum, where one of these jars is kept today, the Baghdad Battery rests not as an artifact of certainty, but as an icon of ambiguity. Visitors peer into its hollow form, seeing not just clay and copper, but the ghost of a spark that may once have lit the hands of forgotten experimenters. Was it a tool, a relic, or a misinterpreted vessel? The answer hovers just beyond reach, as elusive as the current it might once have carried. And perhaps that is the power of the Baghdad Battery. It refuses to tell its story outright. It compels us to stand at the threshold of history and wonder. How much did the ancients truly know? How many sparks have been lost to time? And how many more might still be buried, waiting to emerge from the soil, to remind us that history is not a straight line, but a cycle of revelation and forgetting? The jar remains, mute and enduring, its purpose cloaked in shadow. And in that silence, it continues to hum with mystery, carrying within its clay walls a question that no current has yet fully answered. Chapter 18, the Great Zimbabwe Ruins in the highlands of southeastern Africa, where rolling hills rise into golden light and silence settles across the savannah, stand the monumental stone ruins of Great Zimbabwe. For centuries they have endured, their granite walls reaching toward the horizon like the remains of a forgotten city, their very presence an echo of a time when power and wealth pulsed through this land. The ruins were built between the 11th and 15th centuries, a time when medieval Europe was raising its cathedrals, and kingdoms across Asia were weaving silk and trading porcelain. In Africa, far from the chronicles of European scribes, the Shona people were shaping an urban center of astonishing complexity. Here, without mortar, they laid stone upon stone, fitting granite blocks with such precision that the walls still stand after half a millennium of wind and rain. The most striking feature is the Great Enclosure, a vast elliptical wall that curves around the hillside for more than 250 meters. In places, it rises over 30 feet, broad enough at the base to swallow a chariot. Within its embrace stands a soaring conical tower, smooth and tapering, its purpose still unknown. Was it a symbol of fertility, a granary for storing the kingdom's wealth, or a monument to royal authority? No inscription tells us. The stones themselves remain the only record. To the north stretches the hill complex, a fortress-like series of terraces and walls perched high upon granite cliffs. From here, the rulers of Great Zimbabwe may have surveyed the valleys below, watching over caravans that threaded through the land. The view stretches endlessly, the horizon breaking only where stone walls emerge from the earth, as if the land itself had been persuaded to rise into architecture. For centuries, the ruins were cloaked in myth. Local traditions remembered them as places of spirits, haunted by ancestors, avoided by herders who feared disturbing their power. When Europeans first encountered the ruins in the 16th century, they were astonished. The Portuguese, hearing rumors of a stone city inland, believed it to be linked to the wealth of Solomon's mines. Later, colonial explorers, unable to accept that Africans could have built such grandeur, insisted it must have been raised by Phoenicians, Arabs, or even lost wanderers from distant lands. This misattribution persisted deep into the 19th and 20th centuries. Early European archaeologists, guided more by prejudice than evidence, erased African hands from the narrative of Great Zimbabwe. Reports claimed that it was beyond the ability of local peoples to shape such walls, that it must be a relic of some vanished Mediterranean colony. But in time, excavation revealed pottery, tools, and cultural continuity that tied the ruins firmly to the Shona people, whose descendants still live in the region today. The rediscovery of its true origins was not just an archaeological revelation, but a reclamation of history. Great Zimbabwe stands as one of Africa's greatest pre-colonial achievements, a city whose influence reached far beyond its stone boundaries. Evidence of trade links has been unearthed here. Beads from India, porcelain from China, and glass from the Middle East. Gold mined in the nearby hills may have traveled across deserts and oceans, exchanged in markets from Cairo to Persia. The city was not an isolated outpost, but part of the great web of global commerce. And yet, for all its grandeur, its function remains debated. Was it a royal palace, where kings ruled over vassals and warriors? Was it a sacred center where rituals invoked the favor of spirits and ancestors? Or was it both, a seat of power and a place of worship, where the political and the spiritual intertwined? Archaeologists have found remnants of domestic life, hearths, pottery shards, and tools. They have also uncovered objects of ritual significance, suggesting that daily life and sacred ceremony were inseparable in the rhythms of the city. The decline of Great Zimbabwe remains another mystery. By the 15th century, the city was largely abandoned. Climate change may have played a role, with droughts straining its agricultural base. Exhaustion of local resources, overgrazed pastures, dwindling timber may have forced its people to disperse. Shifting trade routes could have diverted wealth elsewhere. But whatever the cause, the city's heartbeat slowed, its markets silenced, its walls left to the winds. Today, standing before the ruins, one feels the presence of something larger than stone. The dry granite breathes with memory. The great enclosure, massive and silent, suggests more than mere engineering. It feels like a statement, an assertion of permanence, of civilization rooted deep in African soil. The conical tower, whose meaning eludes even the sharpest minds, seems almost designed to remain enigmatic, a silent challenge across the centuries. Great Zimbabwe unsettles modern narratives. It reminds us that Africa was not a passive continent waiting for history to arrive from elsewhere. It was a continent of builders, traders, and visionaries. It was a place where stone rose into walls as enduring as any in the old world, where culture flourished in forms both local and global. Yet so much of its story remains untold. Its scrolls lost, its voices faded. Only the stones remain, patient and unyielding. At dusk, when the sun paints the walls with fire and shadow, Great Zimbabwe becomes more than a ruin. It becomes a threshold, a meeting place between what is known and what is hidden. We see the outlines of a vanished city, but within its silence, we sense a deeper truth, that human history is vast, and much of it still lies beyond the written record. The ruins remind us that civilizations rise, flourish, and fade, but their mysteries endure, carried in stone, waiting for us to listen. Great Zimbabwe stands then as both monument and question, a reminder of Africa's forgotten chapters, and a whisper that the past holds more than we can ever fully grasp. In the hush of the savannah night, when wind stirs through the broken walls, it feels less like an abandoned city than a guardian, watching, waiting, keeping its secrets just out of reach. Chapter 19, the Hippodrome of Halsaflieni in Malta. Beneath the quiet streets of Paola, Malta, lies a world hidden from sunlight for nearly 6,000 years. The Hypogeum of Halsaflieni is not a monument of soaring stone like the pyramids, nor a circle of megaliths rising from open fields like Stonehenge. Instead, it is a sanctuary carved downward, into the earth itself, a subterranean temple where darkness and silence embrace. Dated to around 4000 BCE, it predates much of the architecture of the Old World. Hewn entirely from limestone bedrock, it plunges 3 stories underground into chambers and passages that defy imagination for a people without metal tools. To walk its carved corridors today is to step into a space suspended between life and death, where echoes linger like voices that never left. The structure unfolds in layers. At its upper level lie simple cut chambers, thought to be the earliest excavations, perhaps first used as a collective tomb. As generations deepened their work, the Hypogeum expanded into a labyrinth of halls, shrines, and niches. The middle level reveals the site's greatest artistry. Smoothly rounded walls, carved to mimic the architecture of temples above ground. Doorways, lintels, and even false windows were hewn directly from the living stone, as though the builders sought to recreate their sacred world beneath the surface of the earth. The lowest level plunges still deeper, a maze of narrow passages and small cells, where light falters and the sense of descending into an underworld becomes undeniable. One of the most extraordinary features is its acoustics. The oracle chamber, as it has come to be known, possesses sound qualities unlike any other prehistoric site. A voice spoken within resonates with profound depth, amplifying and vibrating throughout the structure. Frequencies around 110 Hz echo with particular power, a range known to affect human perception, even inducing altered states of consciousness. It is difficult to imagine this was accidental. Were rituals conducted here in which chants or spoken prayers carried through stone to envelop participants in sound? Was the chamber designed to draw worshippers into communion with something beyond themselves? The stone, silent yet responsive, seems to have been part of the rite. Red ochre, the pigment of blood and renewal, decorates parts of the Hypogeum. Faded spirals and circular motifs adorn the walls among the rare surviving prehistoric paintings of Europe. They hint at ritual, at cosmology, at symbolism lost to time. Alongside them, archaeologists uncovered the remains of more than 7,000 individuals, whose bones were laid within niches and chambers over centuries. In this subterranean city of the dead, the living must have entered to commune with their ancestors, to seek guidance, or to reenact myths of descent and return. Yet the Hypogeum is not only a necropolis. Its precision, its artistry, and its careful design point to a wider purpose. Some scholars believe it was an oracle, where priestesses or initiates spoke in the resonant chambers, their voices magnified into something otherworldly. Others suggest it was a mystery school, a place of initiation where chosen individuals underwent symbolic death before emerging reborn. The descent through levels, from upper light to deepest dark, mirrors journeys described in myths across the world. The hero's descent to the underworld, the shaman's passage into hidden realms, the cycle of death and regeneration. The labor required to carve such a structure, in an age before bronze chisels, is staggering. Every chamber was hewn by stone tools against stone walls, a process that would have taken lifetimes. That the builders persisted suggests the Hypogeum was central to their worldview. Not merely a tomb, but a cosmic axis, a bridge between realms. Its very existence forces us to re-evaluate the sophistication of Neolithic Malta, whose megalithic temples above ground, Gantija, Hagar Kim, Nidra, are among the oldest freestanding stone monuments in the world. The Hypogeum ties these temples to an unseen counterpart, a sacred geography that embraced both sky and earth, sun and shadow. the human traces found within deepen the mystery. Skulls uncovered in the hypogeum bear unusual elongation, leading some to speculate about deliberate cranial shaping, a practice associated with status and ritual significance in many ancient cultures. Whether natural variation or intentional modification, these skulls hint at a select group, perhaps a priestly caste or lineage tied to the site's function. The suggestion fuels speculation that the hypogeum was not for all, but for the chosen few who mediated between people and gods, life and death. In 1902, during construction above the site, the hypogeum was rediscovered. At first, workers tried to conceal their find, but its scale quickly drew attention. Excavations began, revealing chamber after chamber. Sadly, much was lost in those early years. Bones, artifacts, and pigments were disturbed or removed without proper recording. Yet even in fragments, the discoveries astonished. Tiny figurines were found, including the famous Sleeping Lady, a small sculpture of a woman lying on her side, full-bodied and serene. Some interpret her as an image of fertility, others as a dreamer in eternal rest, or even as a representation of the soul in trance. She lies as if in sleep, but her presence awakens countless questions. The hypogeum today is carefully protected, accessible only to a handful of visitors at a time. Too much breath, too much humidity, too much light. Any of these could erode the fragile red ochre paintings and disturb the balance that has preserved the site for millennia. Stepping inside, one feels more intruder than guest, moving through chambers that were never meant for the casual eye. The silence is profound, broken only by the sound of one's own breath. In that silence, it is not hard to imagine the echo of chants, the flicker of torchlight on painted walls, the presence of generations who once descended here in reverence. What vision led the Neolithic people of Malta to carve such a place? Was it fear of death or awe of it? Was it a quest for knowledge, for prophecy, for communion with the unseen? Or was it all of these, woven together in a culture whose inner life we can only guess? The hypogeum does not yield its answers easily. It offers instead an invitation to descend, to listen, and to wonder. As the last torch is extinguished and the chambers fall once more into darkness, the hypogeum continues its long vigil beneath the earth. Its stones remember hands long gone, voices that still resonate, and rituals that shaped the unseen bonds between the living and the dead. To stand within it is to feel that history is not linear, but layered, with some of its deepest truths buried, waiting in silence, far below the surface. Chapter 20. The Shigia idol of Russia in the cold, damp silence of the Ural Mountains, where forests stretch endlessly across the land. There once stood a figure carved not from stone, nor from bone, but from wood, buried for millennia in the dark embrace of a peat bog, preserved by layers of earth and water. It waited to be seen again. In 1894, miners extracting gold from the Shigia peat bog unearthed something wholly unexpected. A towering wooden statue, scarred with lines and shapes, a relic of a world long forgotten. It would come to be known as the Shigia idol. The discovery bewildered those who first laid eyes on it. Most artifacts from such depths of time were fashioned from stone, durable, unyielding, capable of surviving the elements. But this was wood, fragile and perishable, yet astonishingly preserved. Radiocarbon dating would later confirm its staggering antiquity. At nearly 12,000 years old, carved during the Mesolithic period, it stands as the oldest known wooden sculpture in the world. Created soon after the last ice age retreated, it belongs to a time when mammoths had only just disappeared from the northern plains, and when vast glaciers still haunted the memory of humankind. Originally, the idol measured over 5 meters in height. Only fragments survive today, pieced together with painstaking care, yet its sheer scale is still imposing. It dwarfed the people who carved it, standing like a sentinel in a world of forests, rivers, and reindeer herds. Its body is elongated, its form stylized rather than naturalistic, and etched into its surface are mysterious geometric motifs. Zigzags, hatches, chevrons, and human-like faces stacked one above another, gazing outward from the wooden column as though marking a hierarchy of spirits or ancestors. These are not idle decorations. They speak of intention, of a symbolic language whose grammar is lost to us. The idol was carved from the trunk of larch, a tree known for its strength and resilience. Its makers shaped the wood with stone tools, chiseling and incising patiently, revealing an astonishing level of craftsmanship for an age without metal. Yet what is perhaps more haunting is the sense of deliberate design. The carvings flow with rhythm, their placement neither random nor careless. Archaeologists and linguists have speculated that the patterns may represent a narrative, a cosmology etched into wood, telling of creation, of spirits, of cycles of life and death. Some see in its zigzags the rivers of the Urals. Others discern the pathways of the sun, or the lines of a mythic serpent coiling across the world. One striking feature is the idols' faces. Several are arranged vertically, stacked as if one world rests upon another. They may suggest a layered cosmos, a belief in realms beyond the earthly plane. Ancient Siberian and Finno-Ugric mythologies speak of worlds above and worlds below, of shamans traveling through tiers of existence. Could the Shigir idol be an echo of that same vision, preserved from an age before written language, before recorded history? For decades after its discovery, the idol was misunderstood. Many dismissed it as a curiosity, even a hoax. How could a wooden sculpture survive from such deep antiquity? Some scholars insisted it could not be older than a few thousand years, perhaps connected to Bronze Age tribes. But radiocarbon tests performed in the late 20th century shattered those assumptions. In 1997, samples dated the statue to around 9,500 years ago. More refined analysis in the 2010s pushed its age back even further, to roughly 11,600 to 12,000 years ago. That places its creation at the very dawn of the Holocene, when agriculture had not yet spread across Europe, and when the Great Pyramids of Egypt were still more than 7,000 years in the future. The implications are profound. The Shigir idol suggests that symbolic thought, spiritual systems, and monumental art existed among hunter-gatherers far earlier than most histories admit. This was no simple tool-making society. This was a people with myth, with ritual, with a vision of the cosmos they sought to inscribe upon the world. And they chose wood, the living flesh of the forest, as their medium. Why would they create such a monument? Some scholars believe it served as a totem, a guardian of sacred spaces, perhaps placed near water or in a clearing where ceremonies were held. Others argue it was a warning marker, a boundary between worlds, the human and the divine, the living and the ancestral. Its burial in the bog may itself have been ritual, an offering to the earth. Across prehistoric Europe, bogs and wetlands were liminal places, thresholds where the veil between realms was thought to thin. Weapons, bodies, and treasures have been found submerged in such places, offerings to unseen powers. Was the Shigir idol too laid to rest as a gift to the spirits? What deepens the enigma is how isolated this artifact seems. Unlike other great works of prehistoric art, the painted caves of France and Spain, the megaliths of Göbekli Tepe, the Shigir idol has few parallels. There is nothing quite like it. Its language of carved symbols may be unique to the people of the Urals, an entire cosmology now vanished. Some archaeologists suspect its geometric motifs may be linked to what is known as geometric Mesolithic art, found in engravings across Eurasia. Yet here, in towering wooden form, they take on monumental presence, a vertical tablet of forgotten scripture. There is also the unsettling possibility that the idol encodes something we cannot yet decipher. A few researchers propose that its markings might represent a form of proto-writing, a symbolic system, not yet letters, but more than decoration. If so, it could be among the earliest records of human thought structured in symbols, predating Sumerian cuneiform by thousands of years. Others see the carvings less as text and more as map, a spiritual cartography guiding the soul across the afterlife, or the shaman across the planes of being. The survival of the Shigir idol is itself a miracle of preservation. Wood almost never endures across such gulfs of time. Without the peat bog, acidic and oxygen-starved, cradling it for millennia, the idol would have dissolved into dust long ago. It is as though the earth conspired to keep this one message safe, sealed in darkness until the modern age could rediscover it. Yet perhaps this too is ironic, for what message remains we cannot read. It endures, but in silence. Today, the idol rests in the Sverdlovsk Regional Museum of Local Law in Yekaterinburg, displayed in fragments carefully reconstructed. To stand before it is to encounter not only the craftsmanship of ancient hands, but the unbroken gaze of the past. Its faces, stern and enigmatic, look upon us as if still guarding a secret, or perhaps questioning us in return. What have we lost in the passage of time? What worlds, once vividly imagined, are now only whispers in wood? The Shigir idol challenges us to reconsider our ancestors. Too often, we imagine them as simple hunters and gatherers, living day to day, bound to survival. But here, preserved in larch, is evidence of something more, of contemplation, of ritual, of transcendence. It is a reminder that long before the first cities rose, long before empires carved their names into stone, human beings were already reaching beyond themselves, crafting symbols to bridge the seen and the unseen. And so the idol remains, silent, towering, inscrutable, a survivor from the twilight of the Ice Age, carrying with it the memory of a people whose voices have vanished. Its lines and faces endure, not as answers, but as questions carved into time. In its stillness, it invites us to listen, to wonder, to consider what else lies hidden, waiting in the earth, carrying messages from an age when the world itself was young. Chapter 21. Chavin de Huantar in Peru High, in the Andean highlands of present-day Peru, more than 3,000 meters above sea level, lies a site that has long stirred both awe and unease. Here, amid the wind-swept mountains, stands Chavin de Huantar, a ceremonial center whose stones whisper of transformation, ritual, and power. Dating back to around 900 BCE, it is among the oldest and most influential religious complexes in South America, a place where myth and architecture entwined to create experiences that reshaped those who entered. Approaching the site, one is struck by its monumental precision. Carefully laid masonry forms plazas and terraces that rise in tiers against the mountainside. Yet the heart of Chavin lies not in its open spaces, but in the shadows beneath. A labyrinth of underground galleries, narrow passageways, and hidden chambers winds below the surface. Their ceilings are low, their turns disorienting, and their purpose enigmatic. To step into them is to abandon daylight, to surrender to a world shaped by priests who controlled not only stone, but the human mind. At the center of this subterranean world stands the Lanzon, the most sacred figure of Chavin. Carved from a single block of granite, rising over 4 meters in height, the Lanzon depicts a fanged deity with bulging eyes and serpent-like hair. Its visage is at once human and animal, familiar yet alien. The deity's snarling mouth suggests transformation, humans merging with jaguars, snakes, and birds of prey. Scholars see in this figure a god of duality, one who unites the above and the below, the earthly and the divine. For initiates who entered the galleries, the Lanzon was more than an image. It was presence itself, the axis mundi, the pivot around which their world turned. The design of Chavin's galleries seems to have been crafted for more than movement. Acoustic studies reveal that the narrow stone passages can carry sound in uncanny ways. Conch shell trumpets, known as pututus, have been unearthed at the site, their calls echoing and amplifying within the corridors. Imagine standing in the pitch darkness of the galleries, the low drone of conch shells reverberating from unseen chambers, voices rising and falling, footsteps echoing unpredictably. Sound here does not merely fill the air, it reshapes it, pressing against the body, dissolving certainty. Many researchers suggest that Chavin's priests use sound to induce altered states of consciousness, guiding initiates into visions, terrors, and revelations they could never forget. The site itself amplifies this sense of transformation. Its very architecture speaks in dualities, light and dark, above and below, open plazas and hidden labyrinths. Water channels carved beneath the temples allowed rushing streams to roar beneath the floors, merging natural forces with sacred space. Some scholars believe these channels could be manipulated to flood certain passages or create a constant sound of flowing water, a reminder of life's movement and the world's unpredictability. The iconography of Chavin de Huantar reinforces the theme of change. Stone reliefs and carvings depict figures in transition, humans sprouting claws, mouths widening with fangs, eyes morphing into those of jaguars. The jaguar itself was a symbol of power and transformation across the Andes, an animal that moved between night and day, forest and mountain, feared and revered in equal measure. In these carvings, the boundary between man and beast dissolves, as though initiation into the cult of Chavin required one to become something more, or perhaps something less, than human. Archaeological evidence suggests that psychoactive substances may also have played a role in these rituals. Snuff trays, tubes, and depictions of hallucinogenic plants have been found, hinting that Shavin's priests guided initiates through visions fueled not only by sound and shadow, but by altered perception. The temple thus became a theatre of transformation, stone, water, sound, and substance, converging to dismantle and rebuild the human spirit. Yet what was the ultimate purpose of these experiences? Some scholars see Chavin de Huantar as a religious pilgrimage site, a place where people from across the Andes came to seek visions, to be reshaped by the priests and return transformed to their communities. Others suggest it was a center of power, where an elite priesthood controlled knowledge and mystery to maintain authority over far-reaching populations. Its influence is undeniable. For centuries after its peak, Chavin's iconography and ritual traditions spread widely, shaping Andean cultures from the coast to the highlands. Still, much remains obscure. The voices of the Chavin people are silent, their myths unrecorded, their meanings uncertain. The Lanzon stares outward but offers no explanation. Were these rites intended to prepare initiates for the afterlife, to bind them to the gods, or to break their will before the priesthood? Did the labyrinth represent the journey of the soul, or the terrifying crossing from one realm into another? We can only infer from fragments, the jaguar faces, the carved fangs, the echoes in stone. What lingers most is the sensation of descent. To enter Chavin de Huantar is to pass from sunlight into darkness, from clarity into confusion. The site embodies transformation not only in its art, but in its very design. One cannot walk through its passageways without feeling the deliberate intention to disorient, to overwhelm, to prepare the mind for revelation. Whether that revelation came from gods or from men remains one of archaeology's most enduring questions. And so Chavin de Huantar endures, high in the Andes, a hushed labyrinth of stone where voices once thundered and shadows danced to the flicker of fire. Its priests are gone, their doctrines lost, their power dissolved into the mountain winds. But the architecture remains, the carvings remain, and the Lanzon still waits in the darkness, an eternal presence, fanged and staring, as though guarding the threshold of worlds unseen. Chapter 22. The Lost Kingdom of Urartuin. The highlands of eastern Anatolia, where mountains rise steep and lakes mirror the sky. A forgotten kingdom once held sway. Around the waters of Lake Van, beginning in the 9th century BCE, the kingdom of Urartu carved its presence into stone. It was a realm of fortresses, irrigation channels, and monumental inscriptions. Its people stood as rivals to the Assyrians, their neighbors and adversaries, yet their memory has dissolved into fragments, their story only faintly recovered from ruins and whispers. The land they claimed was harsh, a tapestry of volcanic rock and rugged valleys. To master it required ingenuity, and the Urartians revealed themselves as master builders. Their fortresses rose from cliffs and ridges, their walls crafted of massive stone blocks, their gates adorned with bronze fittings. Among them, the fortress of Erebuni, founded in 782 BCE, still looks down from the hills near modern Yerevan, Armenia. Its stone stairways and temple foundations bear witness to a people determined to shape permanence from an unforgiving land. The scale of their engineering is no less impressive in the irrigation systems that remain. Across the Armenian plateau, traces of canals stretch for miles, carrying water from distant springs to fields that might otherwise have remained barren. The most famous of these is the Menua Canal, attributed to King Menua in the 8th century BCE. Carved into the rock, it extends more than 50 kilometers, and in places still carries water today. These works speak not only of practical survival, but of a society that could marshal resources and labor on a grand scale. Yet Urartu's legacy is not simply one of stone and water. It is also one of words, inscriptions chiseled into rock faces, and fortress walls in a script that reflects both their pride and their mystery. Written in a variant of cuneiform, the language of Urartu remains only partly understood. Scholars have deciphered names, kings, and victories, yet much of the script's meaning lies beyond us. Unlike the Assyrians, who left sprawling archives of clay tablets, the Urartians did not preserve their thoughts in abundance. Their words survive in fragments, proclamations of rulers etched into permanence, but not enough to reveal their full worldview. Their myths, their laws, their songs, these are gone or hidden still. Religion too drifts in shadow. We know that the Urartians worshipped a pantheon of gods, with Haldi at the center, a warrior deity often depicted standing upon a lion. His temples crowned fortresses, his name invoked in battle and conquest. Yet the full spectrum of their beliefs is unclear. Archaeologists have found shrines, ritual vessels, and carved stone stelae, but the meaning of many symbols eludes certainty. Did they view their kings as chosen of Haldi, guardians of divine order? Or were their rituals tied more closely to the cycles of nature, to the mountains, waters, and fertile valleys they fought to control? The fate of Urartu is one of history's lingering puzzles. For 2 centuries, they stood as formidable adversaries to Assyria, resisting invasions and launching campaigns of their own. Their kingdom stretched across what is now eastern Turkey, Armenia, and northwestern Iran. Yet by the 6th century BCE, Urartu was gone. Its fortresses lay abandoned or in ruins, its kings unrecorded, its people absorbed into others. Some suggest the rising power of the Medes swept them away. Others see a slower unraveling, the weight of internal struggles and outside pressures eroding their strength. The silence that follows their disappearance is stark. What remains today are scattered stones, monumental walls weathered by time, and inscriptions whose voices break off mid-sentence. To walk among the ruins of Tushpa, the Urartian capital perched on the cliffs above Lake Van, is to stand at the edge of a vanished world. The lake's surface shimmers as it did 3,000 years ago, but the voices that once echoed across its waters are silent. Urartu's obscurity is not only the product of its fall, but of what followed. The great empires that rose after, Persia, Rome, Byzantium, the Ottomans, layered their histories over the highlands. Urartu became a faint echo beneath louder narratives, its memory surviving mostly through mentions in Assyrian records, where its people were depicted as adversaries, the land of the Nairi, stubborn and resistant. Only in the 19th and 20th centuries did archaeology begin to recover their story, uncovering fortresses, canals, and inscriptions that revealed a kingdom once central to its age. And yet, even in recovery, much is missing. We do not know what they called themselves. Urartu is a name preserved in Assyrian sources, while the Bible refers to the land as Ararat. Perhaps the Urartians had another name for their kingdom, one now lost. Their language, though partly decoded, reveals only fragments. Their myths, their epic tales, their poetry, all are silent. It is this silence that lends Urartu its air of mystery, a kingdom powerful enough to rival Assyria, skilled enough to engineer enduring canals, ambitious enough to raise fortresses that still stand, yet their story remains incomplete. The Assyrians wrote of their victories in vivid detail. The Persians left inscriptions in multiple tongues, but the Urartians left only shards, their voice half heard across the centuries. As the wind moves across the ridges of Lake Van, it is easy to imagine that the stones still hold memory. The walls of Erebuni, the channels of Menua, the carved images of Haldi. They are remnants of a people whose lives were once vivid and whose power was once formidable. But like so many civilizations, their story is written in broken lines, preserved not in living memory, but in the patience of ruins. And so Urartu waits in silence, between the mountains and the waters, its history half carved into stone, half vanished into the shadows of time. We stand at the threshold, glimpsing fragments, but never the whole. A reminder that even mighty kingdoms can fade into whispers, leaving us only with questions that linger, unanswered, in the highland winds. Chapter 23. The Pyramid. Texts of Saqqara in the shadowed chambers of Saqqara, deep within the pyramids of Egypt's old kingdom. Words were carved into stone, as though eternity itself depended on them. These inscriptions, known today as the pyramid texts, are among the oldest surviving religious writings in the world, dating back to around 2400 BCE. They adorn the inner walls of the Pyramid of King Unas, last ruler of the 5th dynasty, and later appeared in the pyramids of his successors. Their purpose was not to record history, but to map the unseen, to guide the departed king into the afterlife, across celestial rivers, through perilous transformations, and into the company of the gods. Stepping into these chambers is unlike walking into any other monument of ancient Egypt. There are no elaborate wall paintings, no vibrant colors preserved by time. Instead, one finds columns of hieroglyphs cut directly into the limestone, their forms stark, almost austere, and yet filled with a potency that transcends their simplicity. They are not meant for the eyes of the living, but for the soul of the deceased. an eternal script intended to be read by gods and spirits in the liminal space between worlds. The pyramid texts comprise hundreds of spells, sometimes called utterances, that together form a vast cosmic roadmap. Some are hymns of praise, others incantations of protection, and still others directions for traversing the heavens. They speak of celestial boats ferrying the king across the night sky, of stairways leading to the stars, of the pharaoh transforming into a falcon, a lotus, or even a star itself. They are less a theology in our modern sense than a poetic ritual language, layered with metaphor, ambiguity, and mystery. The figure at the heart of these texts is the pharaoh himself. For the Egyptians, the king was not merely a mortal ruler, but a divine being whose death demanded a transformation. The pyramid texts detail this journey, ensuring that Unas and his successors would not perish in the underworld, but rise, radiant, into the sky. In spell after spell, we hear of the king mounting ladders to the heavens, joining the circumpolar stars, dining with the gods, or sailing with Ra in his solar bark. Death here is not an end, but a passage, a transfiguration, a return to the eternal order. Some spells reveal a strikingly visceral imagery. In one, the king is depicted as consuming the gods themselves, devouring their power in a divine feast, absorbing their essence so that he may ascend stronger than before. This cannibal hymn, carved into the pyramid of Unas, is unlike anything found elsewhere in Egyptian texts. It is violent, primal, and cosmic, portraying the king as a predator among gods, feasting on their knowledge and strength. Yet even this strange and unsettling imagery is meant to secure his place among them, for in absorbing their divinity, he becomes one with the eternal. At the same time, the pyramid texts reflect a world rich with cosmic order. Again and again, the king is aligned with the stars, the imperishable ones that never set, circling forever around the pole. To join them was to escape the cycles of birth and death, to achieve immortality beyond the reach of decay. The language is filled with references to light, ascent, and rebirth, as though the very sky were a vast temple awaiting the soul's arrival. But what exactly did the ancient Egyptians believe these texts accomplished? Were they literal instructions for a journey the soul would undertake? Or were they symbolic expressions of a reality beyond language? Scholars still debate. Their language is layered and enigmatic, resistant to straightforward interpretation. Even in translation, the pyramid texts retain an aura of mystery, their phrases unfolding in ways that seem to point to truths half-glimpsed, half-hidden. What is certain is that these texts shaped all that followed. The coffin texts of the Middle Kingdom, written for commoners as well as kings, and the later Book of the Dead both trace their lineage to the pyramid texts. In their earliest form, however, they belonged exclusively to the pharaoh, marking the uniqueness of his divine status. Only later would their promises be democratized, offered to others seeking safe passage into eternity. The setting of Saqqara itself deepens their resonance. This vast necropolis, home to the step pyramid of Djoser and countless tombs stretching back millennia, was a landscape where death and eternity coexisted. To carve these words into the very stones of the pyramids was to embed eternity within architecture, to ensure that the king's fate was bound into the cosmic order as firmly as the blocks of limestone were bound into the pyramids. Core archaeologists and epigraphers who study the pyramid texts often remark on the strangeness of their language. They are not linear narratives, but fragments of ritual speech, repetitions, invocations, abrupt shifts of imagery. To modern readers, they can seem disjointed, but perhaps this is part of their power. They were not written for clarity, but for effect, a layering of sound and symbol, intended to resonate in ritual performance. Spoken aloud in the dark chambers, they would have filled the space with echoes, as though summoning unseen presences into the room. And yet, even after a century of study, questions linger. Did the Egyptians who carved these texts into stone understand every word, or were they preserving fragments of older traditions, already ancient to them? Some scholars suggest that elements of the pyramid texts may reach back into the pre-dynastic era, carrying echoes of beliefs long predating the pyramids themselves. If so, they are more than inscriptions. They are fossils of thought, preserving the earliest layers of human imagination about death and eternity. To stand in the burial chamber of Unas today, surrounded by these texts, is to feel the closeness of that ancient imagination. The air is heavy, the walls alive with words, and the sense of presence almost tangible. The king may have departed more than 4,000 years ago, but the texts carved for his soul still whisper of his journey. They remind us that Egypt was not only a land of monuments and kings, but of a profound spiritual vision. A vision that saw death not as silence, but as transformation into light. And yet, like the hieroglyphs themselves, so much remains sealed. We can trace the outlines, translate the words, and compare them to later texts, but their inner world remains partly obscured. What did it mean truly to become a star? What rituals were enacted alongside these spells? What did the priests feel as they spoke these words into the chambers, knowing they would echo only for the ears of gods? As the desert sun falls on the step pyramids of Saqqara, casting long shadows across the sand, the pyramid texts remain within their stone chambers, carved into permanence, yet still elusive. They are at once the clearest and the most mysterious voice of Old Kingdom Egypt, a testament to a civilization whose grasp of the eternal was both profound and strange. And in their silence, they remind us that even the earliest words carved in stone are not answers, but invitations, doors half opened into mysteries we can approach but never fully pass through. Chapter 24. The Lost City of Akhetaten, Amarna. In the heart of Middle Egypt, where the desert meets the fertile Nile Valley, lies a place once known as Akhetaten, the horizon of the Aten. Today, it is called Amarna, and little remains of its once grand avenues, palaces and temples. Its story is one of the most extraordinary episodes in Egyptian history, a sudden and radical experiment in religion, politics, and art. Conceived by Pharaoh Akhenaten in the 14th century BCE, Akhetaten was not merely a new capital city, it was the epicenter of a revolution. For a fleeting span of years, Egypt's timeless traditions bent under the vision of a single man who sought to remake the world in the light of the sun disk. The Aten, to understand Akhetaten, is to step into the mind of Akhenaten himself. Born Amenhotep IV, he inherited a kingdom steeped in the vast pantheon of Egypt's gods, where Amun of Thebes reigned supreme, supported by an immensely powerful priesthood. Yet from the early days of his reign, he displayed a restless departure from tradition. He elevated a lesser solar deity, the Aten, depicted not as a falcon-headed god or a human figure, but as a radiant disk with hands extending life-giving rays. In this symbol, Akhenaten saw not merely another god among many, but the sole divine presence worthy of worship. This was not a quiet theological adjustment, but a seismic shift. Around his 5th regnal year, Akhenaten founded a new city in a virgin stretch of desert between Memphis and Thebes, far from the entrenched priesthood of Amun. He named it Akhetaten and dedicated it entirely to the Aten. In a bold gesture, he inscribed boundary stelae into the cliffs surrounding the site, declaring that this would be the Aten city for eternity. Within a few short years, thousands of workers raised palaces, open-air temples, administrative buildings, and villas, creating a city of dazzling scale and deliberate symbolism. Unlike the shadowed sanctuaries of traditional Egyptian temples, the temples of Akhetaten were roofless, bathed in sunlight, their altars exposed to the open sky. Here, the Aten's rays fell directly upon offerings, without mediation, without mystery. It was a radical inversion of millennia of sacred tradition, which had always emphasized the hidden, the veiled, the inaccessible presence of the gods. For Akhenaten, the divine was not cloaked in shadow, but radiant, life-giving, and immediate. Art, too, underwent a transformation. The rigid, idealized forms of traditional Egyptian reliefs gave way to fluid, intimate, and sometimes unsettling portrayals. Akhenaten and his queen, Nefertiti, were depicted with elongated heads, narrow limbs, and prominent stomachs, their features softened into androgyny. Scenes showed them tenderly embracing their daughters beneath the Aten's rays, their private lives entwined with public devotion. It was a style that blurred the boundaries between divine and human, suggesting that the royal family themselves were the intermediaries through which the Aten's blessings reached the world. And yet, for all its brilliance, the revolution of Akhetaten carried within it the seeds of fragility. The suppression of Amun and the traditional gods alienated powerful priestly institutions and unsettled a populace accustomed to the comfort of a diverse pantheon. Inscriptions and temples dedicated to other deities were defaced or abandoned, their names erased as though they had never existed. Egypt's vast religious landscape, woven into daily life, was suddenly contracted to a single, abstract focus. For the people who had prayed to Osiris for the afterlife, to Hathor for love, to Thoth for wisdom, this must have felt like an unmooring. The city itself reflected both grandeur and dissonance. At its center stood the great temple of the Aten, an immense open court with hundreds of offering tables, designed to host ceremonies in the full glare of the sun. The royal palaces glittered with painted floors, showing fish swimming in lotus pools, birds perched among papyrus reeds. Yet beyond the official avenues, ordinary houses clustered in neighborhoods where archaeological remains reveal that old traditions quietly endured. Household shrines, figurines of Bez and Taweret, and traces of private devotion suggest that beneath the surface of state orthodoxy, the old gods were never truly forgotten. Akhetaten was not only a religious capital, but also a political one. Diplomats, courtiers, artisans, and scribes all lived within its walls. The famous Amarna letters, clay tablets written in cuneiform, record the correspondence between Akhenaten and rulers across the Near East. These letters paint a picture of a king who, in his focus on spiritual matters, often neglected the political realities of empire. Allies pleaded for military aid, warning of threats and rebellions, but Akhenaten's responses were frequently delayed or indifferent. The empire that his predecessors had so carefully guarded showed signs of unraveling under his watch. Then, as suddenly as it rose, Akhetaten fell into silence. Akhenaten died, perhaps after a reign of 17 years, and his successors, first Smenkhkare and then the boy king Tutankhaten, began a swift reversal. The young Tutankhaten changed his name to Tutankhamun, restoring allegiance to Amun and the traditional pantheon. The priests regained their power, the temples were reopened, and Akhetaten was abandoned. Its monuments were dismantled, its stones repurposed for later buildings, its memory deliberately erased. Within a generation, Akhenaten himself was vilified as the heretic king, his experiment condemned as a dangerous deviation from Ma'at, the cosmic order. Yet the ruins of Akhetaten still speak. Excavations reveal not only the grandeur of its official architecture, but also the traces of daily life, the workmen's houses, the bakeries, the tools and pottery of ordinary citizens. They tell of a city that was vibrant but temporary, a stage for a drama that ended before it could mature. The unfinished tombs in its necropolis suggest that the people themselves did not expect permanence, as though they sensed the fragility of Akhenaten's dream. What compelled Akhenaten to such radical vision? Was he a prophet, a fanatic, or a visionary far ahead of his time? Some see in him the first monotheist in history, anticipating later traditions that would sweep across the world. Others view him as a ruler who cloaked political motives in religious garb, using the Aten to weaken the powerful priesthood of Amun. Still others suggest that his devotion to the sun's light reflected not theology, but a profound spiritual experience, a conviction that the divine could be encountered directly in the life-giving rays that sustained all existence. The mystery lies not only in his motivations, but in the speed of the collapse. Why did his revolution fail so completely, leaving almost no trace in Egyptian memory? Perhaps the answer lies in the balance between innovation and continuity. Ancient Egypt endured for millennia precisely because it revered tradition, weaving stability into the very fabric of its culture. Akhenaten's brilliance may have been too fragile, too absolute, too detached from the rhythms of the people to survive. Today, the ruins of Amarna stretch quietly across the desert plain, the outlines of temples and palaces still visible beneath the sand. The boundary stelae remain carved into the cliffs, a testament to a king who believed his vision would last for eternity. But the desert reclaimed what human hands abandoned, and Akhetaten became a ghost city, remembered only in fragments. And yet, its story endures. In the brief span of its existence, Akhetaten revealed both the heights of human imagination and the limits of revolution. It reminds us that even in the most enduring civilizations, there were moments of disruption, flashes of daring, where a single mind sought to reshape the world. Though Akhenaten's sun city was abandoned, the questions it raises still glow, questions of belief, power, and the human search for the divine. Chapter 25. The Voynich manuscript in 1912. A rare book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich uncovered a strange volume in the library of a Jesuit villa near Rome. Its pages were filled with delicate illustrations, plants that seemed almost familiar, yet always alien, nude figures bathing in green pools, astronomical diagrams of unknown constellations. and lines upon lines of an undecipherable script. The manuscript would come to bear his name, though its origins stretch centuries before his discovery. Today, we call it the Voynich manuscript, and it remains one of the most enduring enigmas of written history. Carbon dating of the vellum has placed its creation in the early 15th century, around the decades of the Renaissance, when Europe was alive with rediscovered learning and the promise of alchemical secrets. Yet the Voynich manuscript does not speak the language of the Renaissance as we know it. Its script is not Latin, Greek, Hebrew, or Arabic. It is not cuneiform, not hieroglyphic, not anything recognized. Instead, it is written in a flowing, consistent alphabet of about 20 to 30 characters, repeating with a precision that suggests a true language, or at least the careful mimicry of one. Across more than 200 pages, this mysterious writing dances alongside illustrations divided into peculiar sections. Botanists call the largest part the herbal section, where each page depicts a plant accompanied by dense text. Yet the plants resist classification. Roots twist into impossible shapes. Leaves combine features of multiple species. Some flowers echo earthly blossoms, while others resemble nothing that grows in known soil. Are these artistic inventions, symbolic hybrids, or memories of lost flora from forgotten gardens? Following the plants, one enters the astronomical and cosmological sections. Here, stars wheel across the pages in concentric circles. Suns blaze with unusual faces, and zodiac-like diagrams unfold, but they do not align neatly with Western or Near Eastern traditions. Some signs of the zodiac are recognizable, such as a cluster of fish for Pisces or a bull for Taurus, yet their arrangement and accompanying figures diverge from standard forms. Around them are crowned women drawn into the stars, as though constellations were animated with human bodies, or perhaps souls ascending into the heavens. Then comes the section most unsettling to modern readers, the balneological, or bathing folios. Dozens of naked women are drawn in winding networks of pipes, tubs, and green-tinted pools. Some are crowned, others ordinary, but all are immersed in streams that twist like veins. These scenes suggest ritual bathing, fertility rites, or perhaps an allegory of transformation. Alchemists once spoke of dissolving and purifying, of rebirth through liquid fire. Could these be coded instructions for spiritual or bodily renewal veiled in metaphor? Or are they fragments of a mythology no longer remembered, where divine waters gave life to the cosmos? Interspersed with these are recipes or pharmaceutical folios, where jars line the margins like apothecary vessels, and lists of text unfold like prescriptions. The implication is practical knowledge, a manual for healing, mixing, or preparing substances. Yet the script that explains them remains mute, guarding its secrets with stubborn silence. The script itself has been the subject of endless debate. Cryptographers, linguists, and computer scientists have pored over its patterns. It displays the statistical regularity of natural language, word frequencies, repetitions, even rules of grammar, but no one has yet matched it to any known tongue. Some argue it is an elaborate cipher, hiding plain text beneath layers of code. Others suggest it may be a lost language, written in an unfamiliar script, now vanished without trace. Still others see it as an invented tongue, a constructed language designed to veil esoteric wisdom. And then there are skeptics. To them, the Voynich manuscript is an elaborate hoax, crafted to impress or deceive a wealthy patron centuries ago. The consistent script, they argue, could be meaningless imitation, the botanical drawings mere fantasies. Yet if it were a hoax, why such painstaking consistency? Why so many pages of careful writing? Each character shaped with purpose, each plant rendered with intent. A fraud would need only a handful of strange pages to bewilder. The Voynich manuscript seems too vast, too deliberate to be meaningless. Its history adds to the enigma. After its creation in the 15th century, its trail vanishes into shadows. In the 17th century, it reappears in the hands of Georg Baresch, a Prague alchemist puzzled by its mystery. From him, it passed to Athanasius Kircher, the Jesuit polymath famous for his encyclopedic knowledge. Kircher was fascinated by strange languages, including Egyptian hieroglyphs, though his interpretations were often fanciful. He attempted to decipher the Voynich manuscript as well, but no answer came. For centuries it lay hidden, until Wilfrid Voynich rediscovered it in the 20th century, bringing it once more into the world's imagination. Today, it rests at Yale University's Beinecker Library, carefully preserved, yet still unsolved. Scholars scan its pages with multispectral imaging, searching for erased undertexts or hidden layers. Computers analyze its word structures, comparing them to known languages. Theories multiply. Perhaps it encodes Cathar rituals, or Templar secrets, or the lost wisdom of Arab alchemists. Others point to Central Asia, to forgotten herbal traditions. Some even speculate beyond the Earth, that its stars and plants reflect a memory not of this world. And yet, the manuscript resists. It has outlasted generations of codebreakers, surviving into the digital age with its mystery intact. Perhaps that is its true power. In a world where so much has been catalogued, translated, and explained, the Voynich manuscript remains an island of the unknown, a reminder that not all human knowledge can be neatly restored. When we gaze upon its pages, we do more than study a puzzle. We glimpse the imagination of another age, an intelligence that sought to preserve truths or dreams in forms we cannot decode. Whether it was the work of a secretive order, a lone visionary, or an elaborate trickster, its persistence is undeniable. The manuscript endures as an open question, a doorway to forgotten ways of seeing the world. Perhaps its plants are not meant to be recognized, but to symbolize ideas. Perhaps its script is not meant to be read in the ordinary sense, but to evoke meditation, much like the chant of syllables in ritual. Perhaps its pools and stars depict not physical things, but metaphysical journeys, a map for the soul disguised as a book of herbs. We may never know. The Voynich manuscript hovers between categories: science and magic, language and art, fraud and revelation. It is both artifact and riddle, both presence and absence. Like the nude figures drifting in its green waters, we too are immersed in a current we cannot fully name. And so, the manuscript waits, silent as ever, its meaning veiled in lines of ink upon vellum, a codex without a voice, a book that refuses to yield its purpose. We turn its pages and feel the distance of centuries, yet also the closeness of minds that dreamed in symbols, as if knowledge itself had chosen to hide from time. In the end, the Voynich manuscript is less about what it reveals than what it withholds. Its survival reminds us that the human story is filled with silences, erasures, and mysteries that endure beyond explanation. Perhaps that is why it fascinates us still. For in its unreadable script and impossible plants, we glimpse the vastness of what we do not know, and the humbling truth that some knowledge was never meant to be fully understood. Chapter 26, The Flood Tablet of Nineveh. In the mid-19th century, beneath the dust and rubble of ancient Mesopotamia, a discovery was made that would alter our understanding of history, myth, and memory. Excavators working among the ruins of Nineveh, once the resplendent capital of the Assyrian Empire, unearthed thousands of clay tablets. They were remnants of the great library of King Ashurbanipal, a monarch who reigned in the 7th century BCE. Among these fragments of knowledge, written in the wedge-shaped characters of cuneiform, one tablet stood out. It told of a deluge, a flood of such magnitude that it threatened to erase humanity itself. This fragment would later be recognized as part of the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest surviving works of literature in human history. The tale inscribed upon the so-called flood tablet echoes with uncanny familiarity. It tells of a man chosen by the gods to build a vast vessel, to preserve life from the waters that would engulf the world. Animals were brought aboard, the storm raged, and when the waters subsided, the ship came to rest upon a mountain. For many, it was impossible not to hear in these lines the cadence of another story, one told in the Hebrew Bible, of Noah and his ark. But the flood tablet predates the biblical text by centuries, perhaps even millennia. It was written in the 7th century BCE, yet its verses draw from Sumerian and Babylonian traditions that stretch back into the 3rd millennium BCE. The man who survives the flood in Mesopotamian tradition is Utnapishtim, the faraway. In older Akkadian versions, he is called Atrahasis, the exceedingly wise. In both cases, he is warned by a god, often Ea or Enki, that the divine council has resolved to cleanse the earth with water. In secret, he is instructed to dismantle his house, fashion a great boat, and fill it with seed and life. When the storm breaks, the skies darken for days, and waters overwhelm the land. When finally the storm abates, the ark comes to rest, and the survivor releases birds to find dry ground. The parallels are unmistakable, and yet there are differences, subtle and telling. In the Mesopotamian versions, the gods are not united but divided. Some weep at the destruction they have unleashed. Others regret their decision. disturbed by the silence of a drowned humanity. Utnapishtim is granted immortality, placed beyond the reach of mortals, as a living reminder of the great cataclysm. Noah, in contrast, becomes the progenitor of renewed humanity, bound by covenant with a single God. What is striking is that both stories, and many others scattered across world mythologies, speak of a deluge, a flood of near total annihilation. From India's tale of Manu and the fish that warns him of the waters, to the flood myths of the Americas, from the stories of the Greeks to those of the Pacific Islands, the memory of overwhelming waters repeats again and again. Could such widespread tales reflect nothing more than coincidence, or do they carry in them the echo of a shared ancient trauma? Perhaps a real event, so catastrophic that its memory was carved into the bedrock of myth. The Mesopotamian flood narratives may indeed have origins in local catastrophes. The Tigris and Euphrates, lifelines of the Fertile Crescent, have long been prone to devastating floods. Archaeological layers at sites such as Shurapak and Ur show evidence of inundation, thick deposits of river silt interrupting the remains of human habitation. These strata date back to the 3rd millennium BCE, coinciding with the era when the earliest flood myths were taking form. Perhaps the people of Sumer and Akkad, confronted with disasters that obliterated entire cities, reimagined them as cosmic reckonings, punishments or cleansings by the gods. But others have wondered whether these myths preserve memories of far older, far larger floods. At the close of the Ice Age, around 12,000 years ago, seas rose dramatically as glaciers melted. Land that had once been home to human communities was swallowed by the oceans. The Black Sea flood theory suggests that an abrupt breaching of the Bosporus transformed a freshwater lake into a saltwater sea, inundating vast settlements. Could these primeval upheavals have impressed themselves into cultural memory, passed down for thousands of years until they resurfaced in Mesopotamian epics? The flood tablet of Nineveh, then, is more than a story. It is a bridge between history, myth, and geology. Its cuneiform wedges preserve not only the artistry of ancient scribes, but the anxieties of a civilization that lived in the shadow of unpredictable rivers. Its resonance across cultures reminds us that memory is not always linear. It flows like water, carrying fragments of the past into new forms, into new tongues. When George Smith, a British Assyriologist, first deciphered the flood tablet in 1872, he was so overcome that he reportedly ran about the room in excitement, tearing off his clothes. For in those clay lines lay proof that the story of Noah was not unique, but part of a deeper, older tradition. The revelation shook Victorian confidence in the singularity of biblical narrative. If Genesis echoed Gilgamesh, what did that mean for sacred history? For the relationship between myth and revelation, the questions remain unsettled, as they were in Smith's day. Some see in the flood myths confirmation of a global catastrophe, a memory of a prehistoric deluge. Others regard them as cultural archetypes, born from the universal human fear of drowning, of chaos overwhelming order. The truth may lie somewhere in between, woven of both geology and imagination. What is undeniable is the power of the flood tablet itself, a small piece of clay, impressed by hands nearly 3,000 years ago, yet speaking across the ages of waters that cleanse and destroy, of survival and loss. It is both artifact and mirror, showing us how deeply humanity has always grappled with the fragility of its existence. When we gaze upon its fractured lines, we are reminded of the silence after the storm, the hush that follows catastrophe. The story waits there, as it has always waited, part history, part myth, part warning. Whether it recalls a Mesopotamian flood or the echo of something far older, the resonance is the same, that humanity has always lived in awareness of the waters that rise and the fragile hope of what may endure. And so, the flood tablet of Nineveh rests in its fragments, whispering not only of gods and kings, but of memory itself. A memory of waters that once covered the earth, or seemed to. A memory of survival, written in clay and carried forward into the stories we still tell. Its words do not end the mystery, they deepen it. For in its lines we hear not just the voices of ancient scribes, but the roar of waters that may yet rise again. Chapter 27. The Temple of Kailasa at Ellora. The heart of India's Deccan Plateau, carved into the basalt cliffs of Ellora, stands a monument that defies imagination. The Kailasa temple, dedicated to the god Shiva, rises not through construction but through subtraction. Unlike other great structures of the world, which are assembled stone by stone, this sanctuary was hewn downward into solid rock, liberated from the mountain itself. It is not simply built, it is revealed, as though its makers sought to free a vision that already lay waiting within the stone. Dating to the reign of the Rashtrakuta king Krishnadeva in the 8th century CE, Kailasa represents the largest monolithic rock-cut structure on Earth. Archaeologists estimate that more than 200,000 tons of volcanic rock were painstakingly removed to bring its form into being. The sheer logistics stagger the mind. If one imagines a workforce laboring day and night, using hammers, chisels, and rudimentary iron tools, even then the task would seem impossible within a human lifetime. Yet here it stands, balanced in scale, ornamented with astonishing detail, and aligned with cosmic precision. The temple's dimensions speak to its audacity. Its courtyard measures nearly 300 feet long and over 170 feet wide. Rising more than 100 feet high, the structure includes towering pillars, colonnades, shrines, and sweeping reliefs that rival the grandeur of any freestanding palace. But all of this, every column, stairway, and statue, was cut from the living mountain, sculpted downward as a single, seamless whole. To attempt such a feat required not just vision, but an understanding of space, engineering, and geometry far ahead of what the tools of the time should have allowed. The artistry of Kailasa deepens its mystery. Its walls are alive with scenes from the Mahabharata and Ramayana, the great Indian epics. Gods stride across the stone, demons battle heroes, and celestial beings watch from above. Every figure is carved with precision, animated as if frozen mid-breath. The central shrine houses a lingam of Shiva, symbol of cosmic creation, while the temple itself mirrors the mythic Mount Kailash, the celestial abode of the god. In this way, Kailasa becomes not only a sanctuary of worship, but a symbolic cosmos, a mountain carved within a mountain, bridging the earthly and the divine. Legends surround its creation. Ancient stories tell of Queen Manikeshwari, who prayed for a temple to honor Shiva. The king vowed it would be completed within a week to save her from an oath that threatened her life. The architect, Kokasa, is said to have begun not from the base, but from the top, chiseling downward with divine inspiration. In this way, the temple emerged whole, as though Shiva himself guided the hands of its makers. Myth credits gods and celestial artisans, for how else could human beings, with the simplest of tools, create a monument of such flawless ambition? Modern scholars propose that construction spanned decades, employing armies of artisans and laborers, yet the logistics remain baffling. To excavate hundreds of thousands of tons of rock without error, while maintaining perfect proportions, seems to demand a system of planning and surveying on par with the most advanced engineering traditions. No signs of large scaffolding, no intermediate stages of trial and error, no abandoned attempts mark the site. Kailasa appears almost too perfect, as if it emerged fully realized. The temple is part of a larger constellation. Ellora hosts 34 cave complexes, spanning Buddhist, Hindu, and Jain traditions. These caves, carved between the 5th and 10th centuries, form a living archive of India's religious evolution. Yet even within this sacred landscape, Kailasa stands apart. It is not simply larger, it is qualitatively different. Other caves are chambers extended into rock. Kailasa is a freestanding, three-dimensional architecture, an entire temple complex released from the stone, like a sculpture of impossible scale. The question lingers, what drove such ambition? On one level, Kailasa reflects devotion, an act of piety that sought to bring the god's mountain to earth. But at another level, it reflects a mystery of transmission. Where did the knowledge to conceive and execute such a task come from? India's traditions speak of lost ages, of yugas where humans possessed powers and sciences forgotten today. Could Kailasa carry within its stone the echo of such memories? Or does it simply reveal the farthest reaches of human determination, where vision and faith push beyond the boundaries of practicality? The temple's presence stirs an ancient sense of awe. Standing within its courtyard, one feels dwarfed not only by scale, but by intention. Every angle frames the sky, every carving draws the eye toward mythic realms, and every stairway suggests ascent, not of stone, but of spirit. The air itself resonates with something beyond explanation, as though the mountain remembers the countless chants, rituals, and offerings poured into its heart. For centuries, Kailasa has weathered invasions and neglect. Muslim armies in the 17th century attempted to destroy its carvings, yet their efforts only scarred the stone. The temple endured, as though protected by the very mountain from which it was born. Today, it stands as both ruin and miracle, an open riddle that scholars measure. Tourists photograph and devotees still revere, and yet, for all we can document, its measurements, its estimated workforce, its dynastic patronage, Kailasa resists full comprehension. It is more than the sum of its stone. It is an architectural paradox, a place where human hands appear to have achieved what seems almost inhuman. To walk among its halls is to sense both presence and absence. The presence of a vision so bold it could never be ordinary, and the absence of the complete story of how it was done. Perhaps this is its true purpose, not to be solved like a puzzle, but to remind us of the limits of certainty. Like the Pyramids of Egypt, like Stonehenge or Göbekli Tepe, the Kailasa temple exists at the threshold where history becomes myth. It asks us not only how such things are possible, but why they are attempted at all. And as the basalt cliffs of Ellora turn red in the setting sun, shadows flood the temple's courtyard, climbing the walls carved with gods and demons. For a moment, the figures seem to move again, alive in the play of light and stone, and one cannot help but wonder if the temple is less a monument to the past than a doorway to something timeless, carved into the earth to remind us of mysteries still waiting in silence. Chapter 28. The lost kingdom of Tartessos. In the shifting sands and fertile river valleys of southern Iberia lies a name half remembered, whispered through the writings of ancient authors, Tartessos. To the Greeks, it was a land of immense wealth, where silver was said to flow so abundantly that even the hooves of horses and the anchors of ships gleamed with it. To the Romans, it was a memory already fading, a vanished people absorbed or erased. And to the modern world, Tartessos remains both presence and absence, a kingdom that may have existed, whose traces glimmer through archaeology, yet whose heart eludes certainty. The earliest whispers of Tartessos reach us through Greek accounts. The historian Herodotus wrote of it as a great and prosperous land beyond the Pillars of Hercules, near the mouth of the Guadalquivir River. He recorded that the Tartessians traded with the Phoenicians and later with the Greeks themselves. They possessed a king named Argantonios, a name literally meaning man of silver. Argantonios, Herodotus claimed, reigned for 80 years, his generosity so vast that he offered the Greeks lands and riches to escape the growing Persian menace. Whether this king was one man of mythic longevity or a dynastic title passed across generations, the story captured the essence of Tartessos: immense wealth, great generosity, and a culture poised between myth and history. Archaeology adds fragments to this legend. Near the Guadalquivir, excavations have revealed settlements, metallurgy workshops, and lavish burials from the early 1st millennium BCE. Rich with artifacts of bronze, gold, and ivory, these finds suggest an elite society deeply engaged in trade. The Phoenicians, masters of the sea, established colonies across Iberia in this same period, and their presence mingled with local traditions. Some scholars argue that Tartessos was less a unified kingdom and more a cultural horizon, a fusion of indigenous Iberian peoples with Phoenician merchants and craftsmen. Others see in the material record the fingerprints of a centralized power, perhaps even a monarchy, that commanded both land and sea. The wealth of Tartessos was bound to the earth itself. Southern Iberia is rich in mineral deposits, especially silver and copper. Mines in the region of Rio Tinto were worked since prehistory, their ores fueling not only local prosperity, but international networks of trade. Phoenician merchants carried Iberian metals across the Mediterranean, exchanging them for luxury goods, technologies, and ideas. In this, Tartessos stood at the crossroads, a kingdom tied to the land yet outward-facing, woven into the fabric of the ancient world. Yet for all its supposed grandeur, Tartessos fades quickly from the written record. After the 6th century BCE, mentions of it disappear. Some believe it was destroyed by Carthaginian rivals who sought to dominate Iberian trade. Others suggest it collapsed under its own weight, its river silting, its harbours failing, its political order unravelling. Still others argue that Tartessos did not vanish at all but transformed, re-emerging centuries later in the form of other Iberian tribes, their ancestry hidden within layers of migration and conquest. The mystery deepens in the realm of myth. Some have linked Tartessos to Atlantis, noting that both were described as wealthy maritime powers at the edge of the known world. The comparison is tempting. A glittering kingdom of riches, suddenly lost, leaving behind only rumour and ruin. While most historians dismiss this connection as speculative, it reflects the aura Tartessos continues to cast, a place where history and legend intertwine. What we do know is tantalizing. In the necropolises of Huelva and other sites, archaeologists have uncovered artifacts that speak of a sophisticated and outward-looking culture: Phoenician amphorae, Egyptian scarabs, fine ceramics from the Aegean. These items suggest not isolation, but participation in a wide network of exchange stretching from the Levant to the westernmost coasts of Europe. If Tartessos was indeed a kingdom, its rulers must have stood at the helm of these currents, mediating the wealth of their land with the hunger of distant powers. The silence that followed its disappearance is almost as striking as the fragments that survive. Greek writers who once sang of Tartessian generosity ceased to mention it. Carthage, expanding across Iberia, erased or absorbed what remained. By the time Rome rose, Tartessos was already a legend, a golden kingdom remembered in name but unrecognizable in form. And yet, the land itself remembers. Along the Guadalquivir, where marshes meet the sea, whispers of lost harbors and submerged ruins persist. Farmers tilling the soil uncover shards of pottery, weights of trade, fragments of ornaments whose designs echo distant worlds. Archaeologists continue to dig, to sift, to piece together the puzzle of a kingdom remembered in words, yet absent in stone. Each discovery adds light, but the full shape remains elusive, half seen through the haze of centuries. Perhaps Tartessos was never meant to be a single place, a single polity. Perhaps it was always more. A myth of wealth and wonder, attached to a people at the edge of the known world, magnified by the eyes of foreigners who saw in Iberia both treasure and mystery. Or perhaps it truly was a kingdom, ruled by monarchs whose names are now forgotten, their palaces long buried, their story swallowed by river and sea. As the sun sets over Andalusia, the Guadalquivir glimmers in shades of red and gold. The river that once carried the wealth of Tartessos now flows quietly, its secrets buried in its depths. The ancient texts remain, the artifacts gleam faintly in museum cases, and the name endures: Tartessos, the kingdom of silver, the land of generosity, the city that hovers just beyond the reach of certainty. And in that lingering uncertainty lies its power. For Tartessos is less a place than a reminder that history is never complete, that kingdoms may rise and vanish leaving only echoes, and that somewhere between legend and archaeology, the truth still waits silent and unseen. Chapter 29, Nan Madol in Micronesia. Far across the Pacific, where the ocean deepens into shades of indigo and turquoise, lies an island fortress unlike any other. Off the eastern shore of Pompeii, in the federated states of Micronesia, rests Nan Madol, a city built not on land, but upon the sea itself. Nearly 100 artificial islets rise from a coral reef, their foundations crafted from massive basalt columns, their walls echoing the weight of megaliths more familiar to the ancient world of stone than to these remote Pacific islands. To gaze upon it is to confront a paradox. A sprawling ceremonial city, born of volcanic rock, standing in silent defiance against both tide and time. Nan Madol has often been called the Venice of the Pacific for its network of canals threads between islets like quiet waterways. Yet the comparison is imperfect. Venice was built upon timber pilings, upon centuries of trade and maritime wealth. Nan Madol is different. Its islets are massive stone platforms, some with walls rising nearly 30 feet high. They are not of wood or brick, but of basalt, immense prismatic stones, natural columns born of cooling lava, quarried and transported here through means that remain shrouded in mystery. Archaeologists trace the beginnings of Nan Madol to around the 8th or 9th century CE, with its full flowering between the 12th and 17th centuries. It served as the political and ceremonial heart of the Sodalur dynasty, which ruled over Pompeii for centuries. The dynasty centralized authority, bringing together clans and tribes beneath a single rule, with Nan Madol as both palace and temple, a city of power, ritual, and awe. The scale of construction is staggering. It is estimated that more than 250 million tons of basalt were used to create the complex. Some stones weigh several tons each, yet were stacked into towering walls with precision and stability. The nearest quarries lie miles away across rugged terrain and open sea. How these immense stones were transported has become one of Nan Madol's most enduring mysteries. Local legend tells of magic, of sorcerers who flew the stones into place, or who used chance to summon the basalt from the earth. Oral tradition preserves these tales, not as fantasy, but as memory, echoing the marvel that even modern eyes cannot easily explain. Scholars propose the use of rafts, rollers, or sledges, yet no definitive method has been demonstrated. The ocean channels and heavy stones pose questions that engineering alone has not fully answered. Walking through Nan Madol today is to step into a city abandoned, yet still alive with silence. The islets hold the remains of temples, tombs, and dwellings. Some were dedicated to priests, others to rulers, others to specialized functions, such as canoe houses or preparation grounds for ritual feasts. At its center stands Nan Dewas, the most imposing of all, an islet encircled by towering basalt walls. Within, archaeologists uncovered a royal mortuary, where the bodies of Sodalur rulers may have been interred. In its shadow, one feels the weight of both stone and memory. The canals of Nan Madol were not merely for transport. They may have symbolized sacred boundaries, dividing sacred from secular, elite from commoner. The sea itself, woven into the city's structure, may have been considered a spiritual element, a living part of the city's fabric. To live in Nan Madol was not only to dwell in stone, but to dwell in a place where water, earth, and ritual merged into a single cosmological order. The Sodalur dynasty, which made Nan Madol its capital, was remembered as both powerful and oppressive. Oral histories tell of their rigid control, of demands placed upon clans, of tribute gathered in food and labor to sustain the rulers and their city. Over time, resentment grew and the dynasty fell, replaced by new rulers who abandoned Nan Madol. The city, once alive with ceremony, gradually became a ghost city, left to the encroaching jungle and the tides. Archaeological investigation into Nan Madol began in earnest in the early 20th century. German and later Japanese researchers mapped the site, and in 2016 it was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognized both for its unique cultural value and for its fragility in the face of climate change and rising seas. Yet despite research, many questions remain unresolved. Was Nan Madol primarily a political capital, designed to centralize power and control the island's clans? Was it primarily a sacred city, a place where cosmological order was inscribed into stone and water? Or was it both, a fusion of authority and ritual, inseparable from one another? The basalt columns themselves inspire wonder. Naturally hexagonal, they fracture into pillar-like forms that resemble the giant's causeways of Ireland or the volcanic cliffs of Iceland. To see them arranged into walls, lifted and stacked with such precision, evokes both admiration and disbelief. Were ancient engineers working with knowledge passed down from elsewhere? Or was this a uniquely local tradition, born of necessity and ingenuity? The stones whisper of effort, of sweat, of lives devoted to building a city that now lies hushed and still. Legends persist around Nan Madol's fall. One story tells of a warrior from distant lands, Isokalekel, who led a revolt against the Sodalur, defeating their dynasty and bringing new freedom to Pohnpei. After his victory, Nan Madol was no longer the seat of power. It became instead a relic, a monument to a lost order, haunted by memories of rulers who demanded too much and of rituals that perhaps belonged to another age. Today, the site is both ruin and sanctuary. Mangroves creep around its edges, their roots tangling with stone foundations. The sea laps quietly against its basalt walls. Fish swim through the canals where canoes once carried offerings. The city is open to the sky, yet enclosed by the weight of time. To walk there is to feel both presence and absence. A civilization remembered in legend, preserved in stone, but without the bustle of life it once commanded. Nan Madol challenges us with unanswered questions. How were such stones moved across land and sea? Why build on water with such difficulty when land lay nearby? What rituals took place in its chambers, and what beliefs guided its construction? Like so many ancient wonders, it leaves us with fragments but no full script, with echoes but no voice. And perhaps that is its power, for in its silence, Nan Madol invites the imagination to wander. Was it a city of kings or a city of priests? Was it raised by human effort alone, or touched by forces now forgotten? Its canals glisten in the sun, its walls stand weathered but unbroken, and its name endures as a monument to mystery. The Pacific waves continue to wash against its basalt foundations, as they have for centuries. And in the hush between tides, Nan Madol remains, a city of stone and sea, a riddle carved into the waters of Micronesia, holding within its basalt heart the memory of a people who shaped the ocean into their sanctuary. Chapter 30, the forgotten kingdom of Kushfar beyond the golden deserts of Egypt. Across the cataracts of the Nile, where the river carves its way through Nubia, there once flourished a kingdom of equal power and majesty, yet long hidden in the shadows of history. This was the kingdom of Kush, a civilization that rose and fell over a span of 1,000 years, leaving behind a legacy of pyramids, temples, and kings who once ruled not only their own lands, but the sacred throne of Egypt itself. The story of Kush begins in the deep south, in a region the Egyptians called Ta-Seti, the land of the bow. It was a name born of reputation, for the Nubian archers were famed throughout the ancient world, their accuracy and strength so formidable that Egyptian armies sought them as mercenaries. By 2000 BCE, powerful chiefdoms had already formed in this rugged land, bound together by the river and the trade routes that ran from Central Africa to the Mediterranean. From the African interior came gold, ivory, ebony, incense, and exotic animals, passing northward through the hands of Kushite traders who grew wealthy in the exchange. The first great capital of Kush was Napata, at the foot of the sacred mountain Jebel Barkal. To the Egyptians, this peak was no ordinary hill, but the dwelling place of Amun himself. When Kushite kings built their temples at its base, they were not only claiming divine authority, but also weaving their kingdom into the sacred geography of Egypt. From this holy place, Kush grew in wealth and power, carefully watching its northern neighbor. In the 8th century BCE, Kushite kings marched into Egypt. Under King Pi, the Black Pharaoh of Nubia, the Nile Valley was united from Khartoum to the Delta. This was the dawn of Egypt's 25th dynasty, when the rulers of Kush sat on the throne of Horus, wearing the crowns of both Upper and Lower Egypt. They restored temples, revived traditions, and sought to heal a land divided by foreign invasions. Yet their rule was not without struggle. Assyrian armies swept across the Near East, and by the 7th century BCE, they drove the Kushites back to Nubia. Still, the memory of their reign endured, a moment when the Nile ran under Nubian kingship, a reminder that the south was not a mere frontier, but a power in its own right. When the royal court shifted farther south, to the city of Meroe, Kush entered a new and brilliant phase. Between 300 BCE and 350 CE, Meroe became a glittering metropolis, its skyline pierced with slender pyramids unlike any found in Egypt. More than 200 still rise from the sands today, their steep angles and narrow bases giving them a distinct silhouette against the horizon. Here, Kushite royalty were buried with treasures, weapons, and offerings, their tombs testifying to a culture that blended Egyptian tradition with local innovation. Yet, Meroe was not merely a city of the dead, it was a city of iron. Archaeologists have uncovered vast slag heaps around the ancient settlement, evidence of industrial-scale metallurgy. The Kushites smelted iron in such abundance that their forges earned the land the title of the Birmingham of Africa. Weapons, tools, and agricultural implements poured from their workshops, fueling both military might and economic strength. And yet, alongside this practical brilliance, there was mystery. The Kushites developed their own writing system, Meroitic script, distinct from Egyptian hieroglyphs, with over 800 inscriptions found carved into stone or painted on pottery. To this day, it remains only partly deciphered. We can read some of the sounds, but the language itself is still lost, its meaning locked away like a voice that speaks, but cannot yet be understood. What stories lie in those texts? What myths? What histories? What royal decrees remain hidden in a script that scholars have pursued for over a century? The rulers of Meroe were not always kings. Remarkably, Kush was one of the few ancient civilizations where queens, known as Kandakas or Candaces, wielded sovereign power. Strabo and other classical writers recorded tales of warrior queens who led armies and defied foreign conquerors. One legend tells of a Candace who met the armies of Alexander the Great, refusing to bow before the Macedonian conqueror. Whether myth or truth, the stories underline a society where women could rise to the highest pinnacle of authority, an extraordinary feature in the ancient world. The religion of Kush was as rich as its politics. Egyptian gods like Amun and Isis were honored, but local deities also flourished. Lion-headed Epidemic, the god of war, appeared frequently in temple reliefs, his fierce presence a symbol of Kushite identity. At the Lion Temple of Musawarat Sufra, massive sandstone blocks bear his image, as if guarding the sacred grounds of a people who saw themselves both as inheritors of Egyptian tradition and as creators of their own divine order. Despite its brilliance, Kush's story fades into obscurity after the 4th century CE. Archaeologists debate the reasons for its decline. Was it overexploitation of resources, as the forests needed for iron smelting were cut away? Was it shifting trade, as routes through the Red Sea replaced the Nile corridor? Or was it conquest, as rising powers like Axum to the east pushed into Nubian lands? Whatever the cause, Meroe was abandoned, its pyramids left to the silence of desert winds. For centuries, Kush was remembered dimly, its ruins half buried, its monuments mistaken for echoes of Egypt. Only in the 19th and 20th centuries did systematic excavation reveal the true scope of its achievements. Yet even now the full story is not told. Thousands of artifacts remain untranslated, thousands of questions unanswered. The sands of Nubia still conceal more than they reveal. And so the kingdom of Kush lingers in a twilight between memory and forgetting. It was a land that once ruled Egypt, that smelted iron in roaring furnaces, that built pyramids rising in the southern sun. But it was also a land whose words remain locked, whose myths are only fragments, whose voice has not yet been heard in full. Perhaps one day, the language of Meroe will speak again. Perhaps the silence of its pyramids will be broken. Until then, Kush remains a reminder that history is not a straight path northward, but a braided river with many currents, some remembered, others still waiting to surface.